Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. A day measured in bells. You wake up, not because you are well rested, but because your body has decided it is time. There is no alarm clock. There is no precise hour. Light seeps in through gaps in the shutters or the thin fabric stretched across a window opening. If you are lucky, the sun has already risen enough to warm the air slightly. If you are not, the room is still cold and the night's chill clings to the floor, the walls, and your bones. This is a medieval morning, and it begins the same way it did yesterday, and the day before that, and the year before that. Your bed is not really a bed in the modern sense. It may be a wooden frame with rope supports, or simply a straw-filled mattress laid on the floor. The straw has shifted and compacted over time, and you can feel the unevenness beneath you. You may share this space with others, family members, children, or even unrelated people if housing is tight. Privacy is not expected. It is not something you miss, because it is not something you have learned to want. The first sound you may hear is movement, someone stirring, coughing, or quietly muttering a prayer. Coughing is common. It has always been common. The air inside homes is often smoky from last night's fire, and lungs adapt as best they can. You do not think of it as illness, just part of living. Time in your world is not a number. It is a sequence of familiar cues. The light looks a certain way. Your stomach feels empty. Somewhere in the distance, if you live near a church or monastery, you may hear the low, steady sound of a bell. That bell does not mark minutes or seconds. It marks obligation. In many medieval communities, bells divide the day into broad segments. They call people to prayer, to work, to rest. Matins may have rung hours ago, long before dawn, for monks and clergy. Lauds comes with morning light. Prime follows shortly after sunrise. You are not keeping track of these precisely. You simply know that when the bell rings a certain way, certain things are expected to happen. You rise because there is work to be done, and because remaining in bed serves no purpose once daylight begins. Candles and lamps are expensive. Wasting daylight feels wrong, even if no one has ever explained it to you in words. You have learned it through repetition. Dressing takes little time. Your clothing is practical and familiar. Wool, linen, maybe leather. You wear the same garments most days, repaired again and again as they wear thin. Colors are muted not by choice but by access. Bright dyes exist, but they are costly and fade over time. Your clothes smell faintly of smoke, sweat, and the outdoors. This is not unpleasant to you. It is simply how things smell. You step outside or into the shared space of the house, and the day reveals itself slowly. There is no sudden sense of beginning, no announcement that something important is about to happen. Medieval life does not start sharply, it drifts forward. If you live in a village, the sounds are small and familiar. Animals shift in their pens. A neighbor speaks softly. Someone stirs a pot over a rekindled fire. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, worn by generations of footsteps. Mud is common. So is dust, depending on the season. You adjust without thinking. Breakfast, if it exists at all, is simple. Often it is just bread, coarse, dense, and filling, or leftover porridge. In many households, the main meal comes later in the day. Eating early is not always possible, especially for laborers. Hunger is present but not alarming. It is a steady companion. You know it will ease later. Work begins early, not because anyone enjoys it, but because daylight is valuable. For farmers, this may mean going to the fields. For craftsmen, opening the workshop. For women, it often means beginning a long list of domestic tasks that will stretch from dawn to dusk with few clear breaks. What is striking from a modern perspective is how little changes from one day to the next. The same paths are walked, the same tools are used, the same motions repeated. Innovation exists, but it is slow, incremental, and rarely noticed in daily life. You do not wake up wondering what will happen today. You wake up knowing almost exactly what will happen. This predictability is not comforting in the way modern routines sometimes are. It is simply normal. The idea that life should be exciting or varied has not yet taken hold. Stability, even dull stability, is valuable. It means survival. As the morning progresses, the sun climbs higher, and with it the pace of activity. The bell rings again. Perhaps it signals terse, a mid-morning prayer time. In practice, this bell acts as a reminder that the morning is advancing. It helps organize effort. It tells you vaguely how far along the day has gone. You do not stop work to marvel at the passage of time. Time is not something to be admired. It is something that moves whether you pay attention or not. If you are a peasant tied to the land, your obligations are clear and heavy. You owe labor to a lord. You owe rent in produce. You owe time. These obligations shape your day more than any personal desire. Even on days when you work your own strip of land, you are aware that much of what you produce is not truly yours. Yet even here, the boredom is not dramatic. There is no constant sense of injustice simmering beneath the surface. That comes later in other centuries. For now, the structure of society feels as immovable as the seasons. You work because this is how the world works. By late morning, your body settles into the rhythm. Muscles ache in familiar ways. Hands move almost without instruction. Thought drifts. This is where medieval life becomes truly quiet, not in sound, but in mental space. With no constant stream of information, no clocks to watch, no deadlines measured in hours, your mind has room to wander, but little incentive to go anywhere interesting. You may think about the weather, about whether the harvest will be good, about someone who is sick, about a story you heard once years ago about a faraway place you will never see. These thoughts are not urgent. They pass slowly. If something breaks the routine, a stranger passing through, a dispute, an unexpected announcement, it stands out sharply. But most days, nothing does. The bell rings again. Sext. Midday approaches. This bell matters because it often signals a pause, a chance to eat, to rest briefly, to acknowledge that the day has a middle. Meals are communal when possible. Eating alone is rare and often associated with poverty or exclusion. The food is plain. Bread, pottage, maybe cheese. Meat appears occasionally, depending on status and season. You eat not for pleasure, but for strength. Conversation, if it happens, is subdued. People are tired. They conserve energy. Jokes exist, but they are not constant. Silence is not awkward. It is expected. As you eat, you are already aware that the afternoon will follow much like the morning. More work, more repetition, another bell or two to mark the slow descent toward evening. The idea that time could be wasted would sound strange to you. Time is not something you own. It is something you endure, something you fill with necessary actions until darkness brings permission to stop. And yet beneath this endurance, questions linger unspoken but present. Is this all there is? Will tomorrow feel exactly the same? And if it does, how many tomorrows stretch ahead, marked only by bells, hunger, and the steady wearing down of the body? You do not ask these questions out loud. But as the midday bell fades and work resumes, you may feel them quietly, pressing at the edges of your thoughts, waiting for anything to change. The afternoon begins without ceremony. There is no clear line where rest ends and labor resumes. You simply stand up, wipe your hands, and return to whatever task was waiting for you before the midday pause. The sun is higher now, and its warmth can be felt more clearly on your back or face, depending on where you are working. In summer, it presses down heavily. In winter, it is pale and distant, offering little comfort. Afternoon work is often the hardest, not because it is different, but because your body is already tired. Muscles are warm, sore, and slower to respond. The novelty of the day, such as it ever was, has long since worn away. What remains is effort. If you are in the fields, this is when the rhythm truly settles in. The same motion over and over, pull, cut, lift, carry. Your hands know the tools well. The handle fits into a callus worn into your palm. You no longer think about how to hold it. You simply do. Time stretches in a way that is difficult to describe. Without clocks, without urgent milestones, the afternoon can feel both endless and strangely compressed. You are aware that the sun is moving, but not how quickly. Shadows shift almost imperceptibly. You glance up occasionally, not to check the time, but to judge how far you still have to go. The bell may ring again, the mid-afternoon prayer hour. For monks and clergy, this marks a clear spiritual obligation. For you, it is more subtle. It is a reminder that the day is aging, that there is still work to do, but less of it than before. It offers no relief, only orientation. Concentration comes and goes. Your thoughts drift, then return to the task at hand. This drifting is not daydreaming in the modern sense. You are not imagining a different life. Such thoughts would feel pointless, even dangerous. Instead, your mind replays familiar concerns. The condition of the crops, the health of a child, whether the roof will need repairs before winter. Information travels slowly in your world. News comes by word of mouth, often distorted, often late. A war may be happening somewhere far away, but it touches your afternoon only as a rumor, something faint and distant. Most days, history is not unfolding dramatically around you. It is happening elsewhere while you work. The repetition of medieval life shapes not only the body but the sense of self. You do not define yourself by personal ambition or inner desires. You are defined by role: farmer, wife, apprentice, laborer. These roles are stable and inherited as much as chosen. They simplify life, but they also narrow it. There is a quiet endurance in this narrowing. You learn how much effort you can give without breaking. You learn how to pace yourself across the day, the week, the season. Overexertion is dangerous. Injury can mean disaster. So you move steadily, conserving energy whenever possible. Afternoon is also when small discomforts become louder. A blister rubs against your shoe. A persistent ache in your lower back demands attention. Hunger returns, dull but insistent. You ignore these sensations because you have learned to. Complaining serves no purpose. Everyone feels the same way. If you are working indoors in a workshop, a kitchen, a loom room, the afternoon air grows thick. Smoke lingers. Light fades unevenly as the sun shifts. Your eyes strain to see fine details. You may adjust your position, angle your body toward what light there is, but there is no artificial brightness to rely on. When the light goes, work must slow or stop. Conversation during this part of the day is minimal. Words require energy. Silence settles easily among people who have shared this routine for years. When someone does speak, it is usually practical. A reminder, an instruction, a brief exchange of information. Laughter happens, but rarely without cause. Jokes are often repeated ones, familiar stories told many times before. Novelty is not required for humor. Recognition is enough. As the afternoon wears on, fatigue deepens. This is when mistakes are most likely. A missed stroke of a tool, a dropped object, a moment's inattention. You become more careful, not because you are alert, but because you know you are not. The bell rings again, perhaps for vespers as evening approaches. This sound carries a different weight. It signals that the day is bending toward its end, not finished yet, but close enough to be felt. The quality of light changes noticeably now. Colors soften, shadows lengthen. In the fields, this is when you take stock of what has been done and what will have to wait until tomorrow. There is always something left undone, always something that could have been finished if there were more light, more strength, more time. But there is not. As work slows, your thoughts begin to loosen slightly. You think ahead to the evening meal, to sitting, to the brief relief of rest. Evening is not leisure in the modern sense, but it is a pause, and pauses matter. Returning home or back to the communal space, you bring the day with you. Dirt on your hands, sweat dried into fabric, the smell of work. Washing is limited. You may rinse your hands or face, but full bathing is rare and often impractical. Cleanliness is relative. The evening meal is often the most substantial of the day. It is prepared slowly, with care, using what is available. The same ingredients appear again and again, transformed slightly by habit and necessity. You eat without hurry, but also without indulgence. This is when stories are sometimes told. Not epic tales, but fragments, memories, bits of local history, who married whom, who died last winter, who owes what to whom. These stories reinforce community. They remind you where you belong. As darkness gathers, activity contracts. Candles are lit sparingly. Firelight flickers, uneven and soft. The world shrinks to a small circle of warmth and shadow. You feel the day in your body now, not as pain exactly, but as heaviness. Sitting feels good. Standing again will feel difficult. You are aware that tomorrow will begin the same way, with the same sequence of bells and tasks. This awareness does not cause despair. It is simply knowledge. Before sleep there may be prayer, not always elaborate, sometimes just a familiar phrase spoken without much thought. Religion, like work, is woven into the day, not set apart from it. It offers structure, not constant comfort. As you lie down, the sounds of the village soften. Animals settle, voices fade. The fire dies down, darkness becomes complete. You do not reflect on the day as a discrete unit worthy of analysis. It was a day like many others. It moved forward. You endured it. That is enough. And yet, as sleep approaches, a quiet question may surface, one that you rarely articulate, even to yourself. If life is made of days like this, measured by bells and repetition, what happens when those bells finally stop ringing for you? Night does not arrive suddenly. It settles in layers, dimming the world a little at a time until details soften and then disappear altogether. In a medieval village, darkness is a powerful force. It determines when activity ends far more decisively than fatigue ever could. Once the light is gone, there is little reason and little ability to continue. You feel this transition in your body before you see it around you. Movements slow, voices lower. The urgency of the day loosens its grip. What remains is a quiet need to rest. Inside the home, the space grows smaller as darkness advances. The fire becomes the center of the room, both physically and socially. Its glow defines where you sit, where you move, and where you do not. Beyond it, shadows gather, indistinct and uninviting. You have no interest in exploring them. The evening is not long. Contrary to modern ideas of leisure time, medieval evenings are brief and subdued. Candles and oil lamps are costly. Firewood must be conserved. You do not waste light on unnecessary activity. When darkness comes, it brings permission to stop, but also an expectation that you will. If there is conversation, it is gentle and unhurried. This is when older members of the household may speak more, recounting events from long ago. Memory holds a different weight here. With few written records available to ordinary people, spoken recollection is how the past survives. Stories are repeated not because they are entertaining, but because repetition keeps them alive. Children listen, sometimes half asleep, absorbing fragments they may not fully understand until years later. These fragments will shape how they interpret the world. Who holds authority, what dangers exist, what endurance looks like. The body settles into stillness. Muscles relax reluctantly, releasing the tension of the day inch by inch. Small pains make themselves known now that work has stopped. A sore knee, a stiff shoulder. You notice them, but without alarm. Pain is familiar. It is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you lived through another day. Sleep comes earlier than it would for a modern person. Without artificial light, your body follows the rhythm of the sun. When you lie down, you do not scroll through thoughts or replay conversations. Exhaustion narrows the mind. Sleep arrives as a necessity, not a choice. The night, however, is not always uninterrupted. Many medieval people experience what historians call segmented sleep. You fall asleep shortly after dark, wake some hours later, then sleep again until morning. This waking period in the middle of the night is quiet and unremarkable. You may pray. You may talk softly. You may simply lie there listening. In these hours, the world feels vast and empty. Outside, darkness stretches in all directions. The village is silent except for the occasional animal sound or the creak of wood settling. There is no sense of danger in this silence, only distance. If thoughts come, they are different from daytime thoughts. Less practical, more reflective, though still grounded. You may think of someone who has died, of seasons past, of how quickly children seem to grow and how slowly everything else changes. Then sleep returns, and with it the end of the day. What is easy to miss when looking back at medieval life is how little importance any single day holds. No individual morning, afternoon, or evening defines you. Instead, life is formed by accumulation. Thousands of days like this one, stacked quietly on top of each other. This accumulation shapes character in subtle ways. Patience is not learned deliberately. It is absorbed through waiting. Endurance is not celebrated. It is required. You do not think of yourself as resilient, but you are. The bells that measure your day also measure your life. They mark not just hours, but stages: childhood, adulthood, old age. You hear the same sounds across decades, and they change meaning as you change. When you are young, bells signal obligation imposed by others. When you are older, they structure time you have learned to navigate. In old age, they become reminders of how much time has passed and how much may remain. There is no retirement. Work continues as long as the body allows. When strength fades, roles shift slightly. You may take on lighter tasks. You may watch children while others work. You are still useful even as you slow. Death, when it comes, rarely feels sudden in retrospect. It is woven into the rhythm of life. People disappear gradually through illness, injury, or simple wearing out. The bells toll for them too, folding their absence into the familiar soundscape. What matters most in this long view is not excitement or achievement. It is continuity. The fact that the fields are worked, that bread is baked, that children learn the same paths their parents once walked. From a modern perspective, this life may appear unbearably dull. Days without novelty, years without dramatic change. But for those living it, boredom is not a central concept. Survival is, stability is, familiarity is. The absence of constant stimulation allows other things to take root. Deep attention to small details, awareness of weather, soil, and season, strong memory of people and places, a sense of belonging that does not depend on personal fulfillment. The medieval day, measured in bells, teaches you something quietly powerful, that history is not made only by great events and famous figures. It is made by repetition, by ordinary people waking up, working, eating, sleeping, and doing it all again. When you step back far enough, these unremarkable days become the foundation of everything that follows. Towns grow, systems form, traditions harden. The future is built not in moments of drama, but in the steady, almost invisible passing of time. And so, as the bells fade into memory and centuries pass, you are left with a question that reaches beyond the medieval world and into your own. How much of life is shaped not by what stands out, but by what happens quietly, over and over again, until it becomes who you are? Story 2. Bread, gruel, and hunger pains. You eat because you must, not because you are hungry in the modern sense, where hunger is an inconvenience that can be postponed or satisfied at will, but because without food, your strength fades quickly, and without strength, everything else in your life becomes impossible. In the medieval world, food is not entertainment, identity, or pleasure. It is fuel. It is security. It is survival measured one meal at a time. Most days, what you eat is predictable, comfortingly so. Bread is the foundation of your diet, so central that it is often used as a synonym for food itself. To have bread is to have sustenance. To lack it is to be in danger. But this bread is not the soft, white loaf you might imagine. It is dark, dense, and heavy, made from whatever grain is available: rye, barley, oats, or a mixture of all three. Wheat bread exists, but it is often reserved for the wealthy or for special occasions. Your bread is coarse, sometimes gritty, sometimes sour. It fills the stomach but does not delight it. You learn early how much bread you will need to get through a day of work. Too little, and your hands shake by afternoon. Too much, and there may not be enough tomorrow. Portions are not measured carefully by weight or calorie. They are measured by experience and caution. Bread rarely comes alone. It is often dipped into pottage, a thick, slow-simmered mixture of grains, vegetables, and occasionally scraps of meat. Pottage changes with the seasons and with fortune. In good times, it may include peas, onions, cabbage, or leeks. In lean times, it becomes thinner, blander, more water than substance. This food is not plated. It is ladled into a shared bowl or eaten directly from the pot. Spoons are common, forks are rare. Knives are personal tools, carried and used for many purposes, including eating. Meals are practical, not aesthetic. You eat when the day allows it, not when hunger strikes. Morning meals are often light or skipped entirely. Midday brings the first real opportunity to eat, especially during long workdays. Evening is when the most substantial meal appears, if one appears at all. Hunger is a constant presence, but not always an emergency. It hums quietly in the background of your life. You learn to work with it, around it. You do not expect to feel full all the time. Fullness is temporary and often uncomfortable. The body adapts. Your metabolism slows. Your expectations adjust. Hunger becomes something you manage rather than eliminate. Seasonal change dictates everything. After harvest, food feels abundant. Bread is thicker, pottage richer. There may even be meat, especially if an animal has been slaughtered because it cannot be overwintered. These are the months when you eat well, when stores are full and anxiety recedes slightly. Then winter comes. By late winter, food supplies run low. Grain bins empty gradually. Bread becomes smaller. Pottage thins again. This period is sometimes called the hungry gap, when the previous year's harvest is gone but the next one has not yet arrived. It is a dangerous time, especially for the poor. You feel the difference in your body. Work becomes harder. Illness strikes more easily. Children weaken, the elderly fade. Meat, despite modern assumptions, is not a daily feature of medieval life. For most people, it is rare. When it appears, it is often preserved, salted, smoked, or dried and used sparingly. Fresh meat is a luxury and a risk. Without proper preservation, it spoils quickly. Fish plays a larger role, especially in Christian Europe, where religious rules prohibit meat consumption on certain days. But even fish is not universally accessible. Inland communities rely on rivers and ponds, while coastal areas fare better. Salted fish travels, but at a cost. Milk and dairy products exist, but fresh milk does not keep long. Cheese and butter are more common, valued for their ability to last. Even then, dairy availability depends on season and livestock health. Fruits and vegetables are seasonal and local. There is no expectation of variety year-round. You eat what grows nearby when it grows. Apples, turnips, beans, cabbage, these form the backbone of plant-based nutrition. Exotic foods are rumors, not realities. Spices exist, but they are expensive and used sparingly, if at all. Flavor comes from familiarity rather than complexity. Salt is essential, not just for taste but for preservation. It is valuable enough to be taxed, traded, and guarded. Cooking methods are simple. Boiling dominates because it is efficient and forgiving. Roasting requires more fuel and attention. Baking bread is a communal activity in many villages, using shared ovens to conserve resources. Food preparation is labor-intensive. Grain must be milled, often by hand or at a mill that charges a fee. Vegetables must be cleaned, chopped, and cooked slowly. Fuel must be gathered. Every meal represents hours of effort, much of it invisible. This labor falls disproportionately on women, whose work in food preparation shapes daily survival. Their skill determines not just taste, but whether limited ingredients can be stretched far enough to last. Eating together reinforces hierarchy. Who eats first, who eats what, and who eats last all matter. The head of the household receives priority. Children and servants eat what remains. This order is rarely questioned. It is understood as necessary. Food is also moralized. Gluttony is a sin. Moderation is praised. Hunger is sometimes framed as spiritually beneficial, a test of endurance or faith. These ideas do not make hunger easier, but they give it meaning. Famine, when it comes, strips away these frameworks. Crop failure, war, or weather can push communities beyond the limits of endurance. Bread prices rise. Quality falls. Adulteration becomes common grain mixed with chaff, bark, or other fillers. The body suffers quietly at first, then visibly. In famine years, hunger changes character. It becomes sharp, urgent, frightening. People eat seed grain meant for planting. Animals are slaughtered early. Migration increases. Theft becomes more common, not out of malice but desperation. Most of the time, however, famine is not total, it is partial, lingering, a season of scarcity rather than collapse. These periods shape behavior long after they pass. People remember hunger. They plan around it. They fear its return. Children grow up learning which foods last, which fill the stomach best, which can be trusted. Taste preferences are shaped by necessity. Sweetness is rare and cherished. Richness is associated with danger as much as pleasure. There is little waste. Leftovers are reused. Bread gone stale is soaked or repurposed. Bones are boiled for broth. Even scraps have value. Food connects you to the land more directly than almost anything else. Weather patterns matter. Soil quality matters. The timing of rain and sun matters. You watch the fields not with romantic appreciation, but with practical concern. Eating in this world is an act of calculation. How much can we spare today? How long must this last? What happens if tomorrow brings nothing? And yet, despite all this, meals are still moments of pause. They break the day. They bring people together. They offer brief relief from labor. Even the simplest food, eaten in company, carries meaning. As you finish your bowl of pottage and wipe your hands on a worn cloth, you are aware that hunger will return. It always does. The question is not whether you will eat again, but when and whether what you eat will be enough. And that question lingers, quietly shaping every choice, every plan, every hope for the days ahead. By late winter, hunger changes its tone. It is no longer the dull companion you have learned to live with, the mild emptiness that can be ignored while work distracts you. It sharpens. It becomes specific. It begins to ask questions you cannot easily answer. How much is left? How long will it last? What happens if spring comes late? This stretch of time when the old harvest is gone and the new one has not yet arrived is the most dangerous period in the medieval year. People later call it the hungry gap, but to you it is simply the way things are by now. The bins look emptier each week. Bread loaves grow smaller. Pottage thins until it barely coats the spoon. You notice the change in small ways first. Meals feel quieter. People eat more slowly, as if stretching the moment might somehow stretch the food itself. Children ask for seconds less often, having learned without being told that there may not be any. Adults do mental calculations constantly, not with numbers but with instinct. If we eat this today, what will we eat tomorrow? If we save this, will it spoil before we need it? Grain is precious now. Every handful matters. Bread is baked less often, partly to conserve fuel, partly to make supplies last. When bread is made, it may include fillers, peas, beans, or whatever can extend the flour. Sometimes the texture changes. Sometimes the taste does. You notice, but you eat it anyway. In these months, food becomes anxiety made visible. The body responds quickly, energy drops, work slows. Tasks that were manageable in autumn now feel heavy. You still work, there is no alternative, but you pace yourself more carefully. Injury or illness now would be catastrophic. Illness, unfortunately, thrives in hunger. Without enough food, the body weakens. Wounds heal slowly, coughs linger, infections spread. Children are especially vulnerable. Their growth falters, their resilience fades. Mothers watch closely, counting ribs, measuring strength by touch rather than tools. The elderly suffer quietly. Many reduce their own portions without comment, allowing younger family members to eat more. This sacrifice is rarely discussed. It is expected. Community support exists, but it has limits. Neighbors help neighbors when they can, but everyone is facing the same scarcity. Charity flows downward from monasteries, from lords, from the church, but unevenly and insufficiently. Aid often arrives late, if it arrives at all. Markets reflect the fear. Prices rise steadily. Grain becomes expensive. Poor quality food circulates more widely. Bakers stretch flour with anything that will pass unnoticed. Some loaves are darker, heavier, less nutritious. You learn which bakers to trust and which to avoid. For those with no reserves at all, the options narrow quickly. You may forage roots, herbs, anything edible that winter has not destroyed. You may trap small animals or birds. You may beg. You may steal. Theft increases during the hungry gap, not because morals disappear, but because hunger overrides them. Laws exist, and punishments are real, but desperation dulls fear. A loaf of bread can mean the difference between endurance and collapse. Authorities know this, and yet enforcement often becomes harsher, not gentler. Scarcity breeds tension. Tension demands control. Punishments are meant to deter, even as need increases. For most people, though, survival depends not on dramatic acts but on quiet adjustments. Portions shrink. Meals are skipped. People drink more water to feel full. Work is done more slowly but still done. You learn which foods sustain best, which keep hunger away longest. Thick pottage is better than thin. Bread is better than greens alone. Fat, when available, is treasured. Taste becomes secondary to effect. Religious fasting complicates things. The church calendar includes many days when meat and rich foods are forbidden. In times of plenty, these rules are manageable. In times of scarcity, they feel heavier. Still, many observe them not out of joy but habit and belief. Hunger is often framed spiritually. It is a trial, a test, a reminder of dependence on God. These ideas offer structure if not comfort. They provide language for suffering even when they do not remove it. Spring approaches slowly. The days lengthen, but food does not immediately improve. In fact, early spring can be worse than winter. Stores are nearly empty. Foraging has not yet yielded much. The promise of new growth feels distant. This is when hope and fear exist side by side. You plant anyway, even when energy is low, even when hunger presses hard. Planting is an act of faith as much as labor. Seed grain is precious. Eating it now might relieve hunger briefly, but it would destroy the future. Most resist that temptation, even when it hurts. Children help where they can. Elderly people watch. Everyone understands the stakes. When the first fresh foods appear, early greens, herbs, whatever the land offers, they are celebrated quietly. These foods do not end hunger, but they change its texture. They remind you that the cycle is turning. Gradually, strength begins to return. Not suddenly, not evenly, but enough to carry you forward. Looking back later, you will remember these months more clearly than others. Hunger leaves a mark. It shapes behavior long after it passes. People who have lived through scarcity plan differently, save more, waste less, fear more deeply. Even in good years, the memory lingers. You never fully trust abundance. You know how quickly it can disappear. Food, then, is never just food. It is memory. It is anxiety. It is hope compressed into a bowl. As the days inch towards summer and the promise of harvest becomes visible in the fields, you allow yourself cautious optimism. But you do not relax. You have learned better. The question is no longer whether hunger exists, you know it does, but whether this year you will outlast it once again. And that question remains unanswered, hanging over every meal until the harvest finally comes. When the harvest finally arrives, it does not feel like celebration at first. It feels like relief. The fields change color slowly, almost cautiously, as if testing whether it is truly safe to offer abundance again. Grain ripens, vegetables swell, fruit appears on branches that were bare and unpromising only weeks before. The transformation is gradual but unmistakable. Food is coming. You feel the difference before the stores are full. Strength returns in small increments. Work becomes easier. Hunger loosens its grip just enough for you to notice what life feels like without it pressing constantly in the background. Harvest time is labor-intensive, but it is a different kind of labor. There is urgency, yes, but also purpose. Every sheaf gathered feels like security. Every basket filled feels like a step away from fear. The work is still repetitive, still exhausting, but now it carries visible reward. When new grain is milled and baked into bread, the difference is immediate. Fresh bread tastes sweeter, fuller. Pottage thickens again. Portions grow slightly larger. No one overeats at first. Caution lingers. The body remembers too well what it felt like to be without. Meals become more regular. Children regain color in their faces. The elderly seem more alert. Illness retreats, though it never disappears entirely. Food does not solve everything, but it changes the balance. This is when preservation begins in earnest. The lessons of hunger are put into practice. Grain is dried and stored carefully. Vegetables are pickled or dried. Meat, when available, is salted or smoked. Cheese is aged. Nothing is wasted. You plan not just for winter, but for uncertainty. You have learned that good years do not erase bad ones. They only postpone them. Despite the return of food, there is no sense of indulgence. Feasting exists, but it is limited to specific occasions, holy days, weddings, celebrations tied to the agricultural calendar. Even then, excess is temporary. The everyday diet returns quickly to its familiar simplicity. What changes more permanently is behavior. People who have lived through scarcity eat differently. They save crusts. They finish bowls. They keep small reserves hidden just in case. They watch the weather closely. They worry when rains come too late or too heavy. Children raised during lean years carry those habits into adulthood. Their sense of normal includes hunger. Fullness feels like a gift, not a guarantee. Memory of famine and near famine shapes communities. Stories are told about the year when the bread ran out or the winter when many died. These stories are not dramatic. They are factual. They serve as warnings. Authorities, too, remember. Lords adjust rents slightly in bad years, not always out of kindness, but pragmatism. Dead peasants produce no grain. Monasteries expand charity when they can, reinforcing their role as stabilizers in times of crisis. Markets respond cautiously. Prices fall after harvest, but no one expects them to stay low forever. Grain is traded but hoarded as well. Trust in abundance is fragile. Religion weaves hunger into its teachings. Gratitude for food is emphasized. Waste is condemned. Charity is praised, especially toward those who suffered most. Hunger becomes a moral lesson as well as a physical experience. And yet, despite all this learning, hunger returns again and again across generations. Weather changes, crops fail, war disrupts fields and supply lines, disease strikes livestock, the cycle repeats. What changes slowly, almost imperceptibly, is resilience. Over centuries, people refined survival strategies. Crop rotation improves yields. New plants are introduced. Storage methods become more effective. Diets diversify slightly. These changes are not revolutionary in daily life, but they matter over time. Still, for the individual living through it, food remains uncertain. You do not experience history as progress. You experience it as this year's harvest, this winter's stores, this week's meals. The emotional impact of hunger is quieter than its physical effects, but longer lasting. It teaches patience. It teaches caution. It teaches you to value what sustains rather than what entertains. In a world where food is never guaranteed, eating becomes an act of gratitude, even when that gratitude is unspoken. Each meal confirms that you have made it one more day. Looking back from a modern perspective, it is tempting to romanticize medieval food as simple, wholesome, even comforting. But simplicity born of necessity carries weight. Every loaf of bread represents labor, anxiety, planning, and memory. The ordinary medieval diet, bread, gruel, vegetables, occasional meat, did more than keep people alive. It shaped how they thought about the future, how they treated resources, how they understood security. Hunger, in this sense, was not just a condition, it was a teacher. It taught that abundance is temporary, that preparation matters, that survival depends not on excitement or pleasure, but on consistency and restraint. And perhaps that is the most lasting legacy of medieval food culture. Not the recipes, which change and vanish, but the mindset formed by living close to the edge of enough. As you finish another simple meal and consider what remains in storage, you do not ask whether tomorrow will be interesting. You ask whether it will be sufficient. And that question, quiet, persistent, and deeply human, connects your world to every other era that follows. Story 3. Cold floors and shared beds. You prepare for sleep not by winding down, but by accepting that the day is finished and the night has claimed what remains. There is no transition ritual designed for comfort. Sleep is not something you optimize. It is something you fit into the narrow space left after work, hunger, and darkness have had their say. The medieval night begins early because it must. Light is scarce, and darkness is absolute. Once the fire burns low and candles are extinguished, there is little reason to stay awake. You lie down not because you feel especially tired, though you usually are, but because staying up offers no advantage. Where you sleep depends almost entirely on who you are. If you are poor, sleep happens wherever space allows. A single-room dwelling is common. The same space used for cooking, eating, working, and gathering becomes the place where bodies are laid down at night. Furniture is minimal. Beds, if they exist at all, are shared. If you are slightly better off, you may have a wooden bed frame with ropes or slats, topped with a mattress stuffed with straw, hay, or feathers if fortune has been kind. Even then, this bed is rarely yours alone. Spouses share. Children share. Servants may sleep at the foot of the bed or on the floor nearby. Privacy is not expected. It is not considered a right or even a particular desire. The idea that one person should sleep alone in a quiet room is foreign to most medieval people. Warmth matters more than solitude. Cold is the great enemy of sleep. Floors are bare earth, packed dirt, or rough stone. Even wooden floors offer little insulation. In winter, cold rises relentlessly from below. You feel it in your feet first, then your legs, then your bones. Blankets exist, but they are heavy, coarse, and often shared. They smell of wool, smoke, and the people who used them before you. You sleep clothed. Night clothes are rare outside the wealthy. Layers worn during the day stay on at night, loosened but not removed. This is not uncomfortable to you. It is practical. The fire, unless carefully banked, does not last through the night. Its warmth fades quickly. You shift closer to others without comment. Bodies are sources of heat. Children are placed between adults when possible. This is not sentimental. It is survival. Noise does not stop at night. Animals often share living space with humans, especially in poorer households. Chickens, goats, or pigs may be kept indoors for warmth and protection. They move, breathe, and make noise. You are used to it. Outside, the village never becomes completely silent. Dogs bark. Wind moves through thatch and trees. Someone coughs. Someone snores. Someone mutters in their sleep. These sounds are not disturbances. They are reassurance that life continues around you. Sleep itself is lighter than you might expect. Mattresses offer little support. Positions are adjusted frequently. You wake often, not alarmed, just aware. The body adapts to resting in pieces rather than long, uninterrupted stretches. This pattern, sleeping in segments, is common. You fall asleep soon after dark, wake some hours later, then sleep again until morning. During that waking period, you may pray, speak quietly, or simply lie still. No one tells you this is unusual. It is normal. Dreams come and go, but they are not analyzed deeply. Some are considered meaningful, messages from God or the subconscious before the concept exists. Others are dismissed as nothing at all. You do not dwell on them unless they linger unpleasantly. Illness complicates sleep further. Coughs echo through the night. Fevers cause restlessness. Pain wakes people suddenly. There is little separation between the sick and the well. Care happens in the same space where everyone sleeps. Death, too, is close. When someone dies, the body often remains in the home until burial. You may sleep in the same room as the dead, sometimes for days. This proximity is not considered morbid. It is familiar. Death is part of the household rhythm. Children learn early to sleep through discomfort, hard surfaces, cold drafts, shared air. These conditions shape expectations. Comfort is relative. What would feel intolerable to a modern sleeper feels normal to you. Among the wealthy, sleeping arrangements differ, but not as much as you might imagine. Beds are larger, elevated, sometimes enclosed with curtains to trap warmth. Feather mattresses are more common. Linen sheets are finer. But even here, privacy is limited. Servants sleep nearby, ready to attend if needed. Children share beds or rooms. Large households hum softly at night with layered breathing and movement. Nighttime dangers exist, but they are not constant. Fire is a concern, so is theft. Doors are barred, windows shuttered. You trust the structure of the community to protect you while you sleep. Sleep is not romanticized. It is not framed as restoration or self-care. It is a necessary pause, nothing more. You sleep so that you can work again tomorrow. And yet, in this necessity, something subtle happens. Lying in the dark, surrounded by others, listening to the sounds of breathing and movement, you experience a kind of collective rest. Your body is not isolated. Your sleep is shared, shaped by the presence of others. This closeness creates tolerance. You learn to ignore small disturbances. You learn patience. You learn to exist comfortably in less than ideal conditions. Over years, this kind of sleep shapes how you relate to discomfort itself. You do not expect perfect conditions. You expect adequacy. As you drift between waking and sleeping, wrapped in shared warmth, you do not ask for silence or softness. You ask only that morning comes, and that you are able to rise when it does. And somewhere in the dark, as the night stretches on, a quiet question forms, not urgently, but persistently. What does it mean to rest, when rest is never truly private, never fully comfortable, and never entirely free from the world around you? You wake in the dark without knowing the time. There is no clock to consult, no glowing numbers to reassure you that the night is half over or nearly done. You simply wake, the way people have always woken, because the body has shifted, because the cold has crept closer, because a sound has pulled you briefly back into awareness. This waking is not alarming. It does not carry the frustration that modern sleeplessness often does. You are not worried about productivity tomorrow or the number of hours you have slept. You are awake because this is how sleep works. Around you, others stir as well. Someone turns over. A child murmurs. A nearby sleeper coughs, then settles again. The house breathes softly, a living thing made of wood, straw, and people. This middle-of-the-night waking is familiar enough to have a name in later centuries, but you do not name it. You simply experience it. Some people use this time to pray quietly, reciting familiar words by memory. Others whisper to one another, sharing thoughts that did not surface during the busy daylight hours. These conversations are rarely dramatic. They are practical, reflective, sometimes tender. Plans for tomorrow, concerns about health, memories of someone gone. The darkness makes voices softer, thoughts slower. If you are alone in your thoughts, you may simply lie there, aware of your body in a way daylight does not allow. You notice aches more clearly now, the stiffness in your joints, the dull pain that has settled somewhere permanent. You take stock, not out of anxiety but habit. The night exposes vulnerability. During the day, work distracts you from the fragility of the body. At night, with movement stilled and senses narrowed, that fragility becomes more apparent. Illness feels heavier. Pain feels closer. Fear, when it appears, feels more personal. This is especially true during winter nights when cold presses in from every direction. Blankets shift. Gaps open. You adjust, pulling fabric closer, tucking feet beneath you. Sleep is a constant negotiation between warmth and stiffness. You learn how to endure discomfort without fighting it. Resistance only makes it sharper. Acceptance dulls the edge. This skill-quiet endurance is learned early and practiced nightly. For children, night can be frightening at first. Darkness feels endless. Strange sounds loom larger. Over time, they learn what can be ignored, which noises signal danger and which do not. This learning is not taught explicitly. It happens through repetition and reassurance. Adults model calm. Even when fear exists, it is rarely displayed. Panic serves no purpose. If something must be addressed, a fire, an intruder, an illness, it will be addressed. Until then, stillness is preferable. Sleep resumes eventually, not because the conditions improve, but because the body allows it. Exhaustion overcomes awareness. You drift back into rest, carried by familiarity rather than comfort. Morning will come, whether you are ready or not. This kind of sleep shapes your relationship with vulnerability. You learn that being exposed to cold, to noise, to others is not exceptional. It is normal. Privacy is not required for rest. Safety comes from proximity, not isolation. Modern ideas of personal space do not apply here. Bodies are close. Breathing is shared. Even sleep is communal. This closeness reduces certain fears while heightening others. Loneliness is rare, so is solitude. The absence of solitude means that inner life develops differently. Thoughts are less likely to spiral inward. There is always someone nearby, physically if not emotionally. Silence is shared rather than empty. Nighttime is also when care happens most visibly. If someone is ill, others wake to tend them. Water is fetched. Cloths are cooled. Prayers are spoken softly. There is no separate sick room for most people. Suffering is witnessed. This witnessing creates familiarity with decline. Children grow up seeing illness and recovery, aging and death. Sleep does not shield them from these realities. Beds are places of rest, but also of birth and dying. The bed is not a private sanctuary. It is a stage where much of life unfolds. As you age, sleep changes. Older bodies wake more often. Cold settles deeper. Pain interrupts rest more frequently. Yet expectations do not change. You do not demand better conditions. You adapt again. When sleep becomes difficult, it is endured the same way work is endured steadily, without complaint. Among the wealthy, night waking looks different but not entirely better. Beds are softer, curtains block drafts, servants may tend fires through the night. Still, vulnerability remains. Fire hazards increase. Enclosed spaces trap smoke. Fear of theft or conspiracy lingers. No one truly sleeps without concern. Over time, night teaches patience. It teaches you that rest does not mean perfection. It means adequacy, enough warmth, enough quiet, enough time to close your eyes before the day begins again. This understanding spills into waking life. You expect less. You tolerate more. You do not chase ideal conditions. You work with what exists. Looking back, historians sometimes describe medieval sleep as poor, fragmented, uncomfortable. This is true by modern standards, but it is also incomplete. What medieval sleep lacks in comfort, it compensates for in integration. Sleep is not separate from life. It is not protected from it. It exists within the same space as work, family, illness, and care. In this way, rest becomes another form of participation. As the night moves toward dawn and the body prepares to rise once more, you do not measure how well you slept. You measure whether you are able to stand. And as your eyes close again, briefly, before morning arrives, a quiet question lingers in the dark. When rest is shared, imperfect, and shaped by necessity rather than desire, does it change what it means to feel rested at all? Morning does not arrive gently. It announces itself through small disruptions, a shift in light, a draft of colder air, the movement of someone rising nearby. There is no quiet, solitary awakening. You wake because others do. The household stirs as a single organism, each person responding to the same cues. The first moments of morning are slow. Bodies are stiff from the night. Joints protest. Muscles resist movement. You sit up carefully, wrapping clothing tighter around yourself, bracing against the cold that has settled in the space during the night. Sleep, such as it was, is already fading into memory. There is no sense of evaluating it, no question of whether it was good or bad. It happened. That is enough. Privacy, or the lack of it, defines this moment as much as any other. You dress in front of others without self-consciousness. Children are everywhere. Someone coughs. Someone stretches. The routines of waking are communal, efficient, and unremarkable. This lack of privacy extends beyond sleep. In medieval life, almost everything is shared: space, sound, time, and often emotion. The idea of retreating alone to process feelings is rare. Distress is absorbed into the group. Joy, when it appears, is likewise shared. This shapes people differently. Without private space, identity becomes more relational. You know who you are in relation to others: parent, child, worker, neighbor. Solitude, when it happens, is accidental rather than intentional. It is found in fields, on roads, in moments of repetitive labor where the mind can wander while the body works. Rest, then, is not defined by isolation. It is defined by relief from obligation. The end of work, the pause of night, the shared stillness of bodies lying down together. This understanding of rest influences how people recover from hardship. There is no expectation of retreating to heal emotionally or physically. Healing happens in place, among others, within the same constraints that cause the strain. Modern assumptions often frame this as deprivation, and in many ways it is. Comfort is limited. Control over environment is minimal. Yet there is also a form of resilience built into this arrangement. You are never fully alone with your suffering. When illness strikes, someone notices. When exhaustion deepens, it is visible. When grief arrives, it is witnessed. Privacy might have offered protection, but it would also have hidden these things. In shared spaces, nothing disappears quietly. Sleep itself reflects this collective existence. It is not a boundary between self and world. It is a softer state within it. Sounds continue. People move. Life does not pause simply because you are resting. This constant low-level awareness carries into waking life. You are attuned to others' presence. You notice changes in breathing, posture, routine. These cues matter. They signal health, mood, stability. Over time, this attentiveness becomes instinctive. Children raised in such environments learn to regulate themselves early. They adapt to noise. They share resources. They sleep when they can, not when conditions are ideal. Their expectations are shaped by reality rather than preference. As adults, they carry these adaptations forward. Discomfort does not surprise them, it is anticipated. From a modern viewpoint, it may seem that medieval people lack something essential: privacy, comfort, quiet. But they also possess something that is harder to name: a shared tolerance for imperfection. Rest did not promise restoration, it promised continuation. And continuation was enough. Beds, such as they were, became places of transition rather than escape. Birth happened there, illness unfolded there, death arrived there. Sleep was one thread among many woven into that space. When someone died, the bed did not become sacred or forbidden. It was reused. Life moved on. This practical approach to space reflected a broader worldview. Resources are limited, time is short, and meaning is found in endurance rather than preservation. Over generations, this way of resting shaped social bonds. Dependence on others was not weakness, it was expected. Vulnerability was shared, normalized, and managed collectively. The medieval world did not offer the illusion of self-sufficiency. Survival depended on closeness, cooperation, and shared rhythms even at night. As centuries pass and ideas of privacy and comfort evolve, something shifts. Sleep becomes more individual. Rooms are separated. Noise is minimized. Rest is optimized, protected, measured. But something is also lost. The sense that rest is a communal act, that recovery does not require withdrawal, that being surrounded even imperfectly can be its own form of support. Looking back at medieval sleep, with its cold floors and shared beds, we see not just hardship but adaptation. A different answer to the question of how humans endure long days and uncertain futures. And perhaps that leaves us with a final reflection to carry forward. When rest is woven into shared life rather than carved out as private escape, does it change not only how we sleep, but how we endure being human at all? Story 4. Work that never ended. You wake before the sun, or nearly with it, because the day demands it. Labor begins at first light, not out of ambition, not for enjoyment, but because it must. The world of the medieval person is structured around work in a way modern life rarely is. Every hour carries obligation, and the rhythm of survival depends on adherence to that rhythm. Fields await the farmer. Crops must be tended, watered if possible, weeds removed, pests discouraged. The soil will not wait, and neither will hunger. Work is dictated not by whim, but by the season and the weather. Rain may halt some tasks, but it does not cancel the need for labor, it merely shifts it. In the home, tasks pile up as well. Firewood must be chopped, meals prepared, water fetched from distant wells, animals tended. Children require attention, and the sick demand care. There is no distinction between necessity and duty. All labor is intertwined. Every day repeats familiar motions with slight variation. Work is rarely specialized in small households. You may farm, cook, spin, mend, repair, and clean all in a single day. Specialization exists in towns and among skilled artisans, but even there life is labor-heavy. The blacksmith tends fires, hammers iron, maintains tools, and sells wares. The weaver tends looms, prepares fibers, and delivers finished textiles. Their tasks differ from the peasants, but the time commitment is similar. Time itself is measured by outcomes rather than hours. There are no labor laws, no clock-in systems, only the pace set by need. If the crops must be harvested, the day stretches until they are gathered. If the roof leaks, it is repaired while it rains because the alternative damage cannot be tolerated. Work is urgent because it is existential, not contractual. Meals are brief interludes. Breakfast, often just bread or leftovers, is swallowed quickly before returning to labor. Midday, there may be a pause for pottage or gruel eaten standing near the work, while hands are still soiled from field or workshop. Food is fuel, not recreation. The body is a tool, and it must be fed efficiently. The rhythm of work is largely dictated by light. Sunlight is precious. Shadows stretch and contract, marking the day with a natural clock. When light diminishes, labor slows. Tasks that cannot be completed are postponed until the next day. This postponement is anxiety-inducing, but necessary. Seasons dictate not just what must be done, but how much energy it will take. Summer brings heat, which slows the body, but also abundance of growth. Winter brings cold, which saps strength, but also fewer tasks that can be completed outdoors. Autumn is frantic, harvest and preparation for the lean months. Spring is cautious, planting and repairing from winter damage. Work is not divided equally among people. Age, gender, and status shape responsibility. Children begin labor early, learning by observation and imitation. Girls spin and sew, fetch water, tend fires, help with cooking. Boys carry water, herd animals, and assist in field work. Adults take on heavier and more technical work. The elderly reduce workload gradually if they are lucky enough to survive. Despite the intensity, work is repetitive. The motions are familiar, learned through experience. Muscle memory takes over. Tools become extensions of the body. The plow in your hands, the spinning wheel under your fingers, the hammer striking iron. You move efficiently, unconsciously aware of the rhythm. Novelty is rare. Repetition dominates. Pain accompanies labor. Blisters form on hands, calluses harden, joints ache. Fatigue is a constant companion. Yet complaints are minimal because everyone suffers similarly, and because expressing weakness could have social or economic consequences. Endurance is expected and silently admired. Work extends beyond the visible labor. Planning, observation, and vigilance occupy the mind even when the body rests. You notice how clouds gather, how soil cracks, how livestock behave. These observations inform action. Work is not only doing, it is anticipating. Even holidays and holy days are shaped by labor. While some relief is given for religious observances, the work of survival does not pause. Fields cannot be left untended for weeks. Animals cannot go unfed because it is a festival. Work continues alongside devotion, often quietly in the background. There is little room for leisure. Socializing occurs while working, tending fields together, sharing tasks in the workshop, or helping neighbors. Community reinforces labor expectations. Gossip, minor storytelling, and shared complaints make work bearable, but they are secondary to the primary purpose: survival. For those employed by lords or guilds, work carries obligations that cannot be negotiated. Rents, tithes, and fees demand that productivity meet external requirements. Failure to meet quotas can result in punishment, fines, or social disgrace. Labor is a means of both survival and obligation, entwined with authority. The mind, despite being trained to endure monotony, often drifts during repetitive tasks. Thoughts wander, plans are rehearsed, memories recalled. This mental escape is tolerated, even necessary. Yet concentration is never fully surrendered because mistakes carry tangible consequences. Dropped tools, broken equipment, or neglected crops have immediate repercussions. Sleep is the only genuine break, but even that is measured by necessity. Long nights of rest are impossible for those caring for children, livestock, or ill household members. Nighttime labor sometimes interrupts rest. A fire that must be attended, a sick person who requires care, a roof leak that threatens to worsen with dawn. Over time, endless work becomes both burden and identity. You do not think of yourself as a worker in an abstract sense. Your value and existence are inseparable from labor. It is how you participate in the world, how you contribute, and how you survive. Work shapes your perception of time, your body, and even your morality. To fail in labor is not only to risk hunger, it is to risk shame and vulnerability. The relentless nature of work leaves little room for reflection, yet it shapes thought subtly. Patience develops naturally. Planning skills sharpen unconsciously. The ability to endure discomfort becomes a constant mental companion. These are not virtues in the modern sense, taught or celebrated, but survival mechanisms honed through repetition. And yet, for all its monotony, work sometimes surprises. A crop grows better than expected. A repaired roof holds. A meal is shared successfully among many. These small victories are the only markers of progress, the only rewards that make the endless labor tolerable. They do not feel dramatic, but they matter. Without them, survival would be impossible. As the day continues, each movement becomes a testament to endurance rather than accomplishment. Hands blister, backs ache, muscles groan, but the work is done, or at least enough of it is done to keep the household alive another day. Tomorrow, the same cycle will begin again. And in the quiet moments, as the sun dips toward the horizon and labor winds down, a thought lingers. If life is measured in labor, in the constant repetition of tasks, then what is the measure of the individual? Is it the work completed, the survival achieved, or something else that remains unseen? As the day progresses, the repetitive nature of medieval labor begins to reveal its full effect not just on the body, but on the mind. By late morning, the muscles are warm but sore. Hands carry blisters. Backs bend under the familiar strain. Yet, despite the fatigue, work does not pause. The day's tasks dictate the pace, and the body, trained over years, follows almost automatically. Repetition becomes rhythm. Pulling weeds, sowing seeds, kneading dough, tending fires, all these motions fall into a cadence, predictable and steady. The monotony may appear dull from the outside, but there is subtle satisfaction in completion. Every small task achieved guarantees survival, even if it does not bring pleasure. In this way, medieval labor is both merciless and quietly rewarding. The division of labor is strict yet flexible. Gender roles define certain expectations. Women spin, sew, cook, and tend children. Men plow, carry, hunt, and repair. Age and health determine capacity. Children are apprenticed early, elders reduce their workload gradually. But everyone contributes because the household's survival is collective. There is no room for idleness. Every moment counts, even the dull ones. Within towns and villages, social networks reinforce the expectation of labor. Helping a neighbor, delivering grain to a mill, repairing communal structures, these are obligations intertwined with daily survival. Failing to contribute could mean more than social disapproval. It could mean literal deprivation for yourself or your household. Despite its repetition, work carries subtle variation dictated by seasons, weather, and unforeseen events. A sudden storm may flood the fields, forcing urgent repair. A sick cow may demand care in the middle of a plowing session. Tools break unexpectedly. Humans and animals are fallible. You adapt continuously, learning to anticipate patterns and, crucially, to improvise when deviations occur. This improvisation is rarely heroic, it is quiet, practical, and necessary. The physical toil is relentless, but mental labor is constant as well. You must track the growth of crops, remember the timing of planting and harvesting, and forecast the use of stored food. Simple survival requires strategy. How much seed to plant, how much grain to keep for winter, how much firewood is enough. These calculations are rarely written down. They exist in memory, reinforced by repetition and observation. Community labor has another function, teaching resilience. Children learn by watching and doing. Apprentices observe the rhythm of the workshop, the way a blacksmith hammers with a steady hand or a baker times bread in the oven. Even mistakes carry lessons. Spilled flour, a broken tool, overworked animals all teach careful attention to detail and the consequences of neglect. Learning is constant, woven into daily survival. Fatigue is a teacher as well. Pain becomes a familiar signal rather than a warning. Blisters harden into calluses. Muscles grow accustomed to strain. The body adapts, sometimes painfully, to a routine that would seem intolerable to a modern person accustomed to rest and comfort. Endurance is internalized, becoming a quiet virtue embedded in everyday life. Labor is not only survival, it is social glue. Shared work fosters bonds and mutual understanding. Fields, mills, and workshops hum with collective effort. Gossip, small jokes, and advice pass along during shared labor, lightening the burden even if only slightly. These interactions are not leisure, they are integral to functioning efficiently as a group. The wealthier classes experience a different rhythm, but it is still dominated by labor. Lords oversee estates, making administrative decisions, collecting rents, supervising craftsmen and tenants. Even clerics and scholars are bound by routine, copying manuscripts, tending libraries, observing rituals. Work persists, though its form is more intellectual than physical. Still, repetition dominates. Efficiency and endurance define the rhythm, not excitement. The day is punctuated by the ringing of bells. Monasteries, churches, and town halls mark time not with clocks but with sound. Each toll signals prayer, meal, or task, but also structures the mind, giving the day an external rhythm that frames labor. You may not think about the bells consciously, but they anchor you in time. You act, eat, or pray in alignment with them. They are both mundane and essential. Even when the sun begins to fall and the day winds down, labor does not stop entirely. Evening chores, feeding animals, tending fires, mending tools must be completed before rest. By this time the body aches, the mind is foggy, yet work continues because necessity demands it. There is no luxury of postponement. Tomorrow will bring another cycle, and incompletion today has consequences then. Through this unrelenting routine, people develop a keen sense of efficiency. Every movement is measured. Waste is minimized. Time, food, and energy are precious commodities. Modern concepts of fun or entertainment rarely enter the picture. Satisfaction is derived from completion, from the knowledge that the household is sustained another day. These small victories are quiet but essential. Work teaches adaptability as well as endurance. Seasonal shifts require flexibility. Harsh winters, dry summers, or early frosts force changes in technique and priorities. Labor is not rigid. It evolves with circumstances, though slowly. You learn to read the land, the tools, and the people around you. Anticipation becomes as important as action. And yet, for all its repetition and hardship, labor carries subtle satisfaction. A plowed field in spring, a finished loaf of bread, repaired tools, these accomplishments are modest, but they matter. Survival itself is the reward. There is no need for drama or recognition. Continuity and endurance are sufficient. By late afternoon, exhaustion deepens. Hands blister, backs ache, shoulders sag. Yet work is still required and still accomplished. This persistence shapes character. Patience, foresight, and tolerance for discomfort become second nature. You are not heroic, only consistent. That consistency is what defines life in the medieval world. As the sun sinks low, the day concludes with small gestures, extinguishing fires, securing livestock, covering stored grain, sharing a final meal. There is a brief pause before the cycle begins again. The body rests. The mind quiets, but only briefly. The unending nature of labor is never far from thought. Tomorrow will arrive, and with it the same demands, the same routines, the same necessary repetition. And as the day closes, you are left with a quiet, persistent question. If life is measured almost entirely in work, in tasks repeated until they become instinct, how does a person define themselves? By what they accomplish, or by the endurance of the process itself? The day ends, but work never truly stops. Even as the sun dips below the horizon, the demands of survival linger, folded into small tasks that must be completed before night claims the household entirely. Feeding the animals, banking the fire, repairing tools, checking that stored grain is safe, all of these chores signal the unbroken chain of effort that defines life in a medieval household. Labor is relentless, but it is also familiar. A rhythm ingrained in the body and mind from childhood. By nightfall, the body is weary, the hands blistered, the muscles aching. Yet there is a quiet satisfaction in having completed what could be completed. The plowed fields, repaired fences, and freshly baked bread are tangible markers of success. They are not celebrated with ceremony or song, but they are acknowledged in subtle ways. A nod, a shared glance, the unspoken understanding that survival has been secured for another day. Sleep offers a brief respite, but it is neither luxurious nor uninterrupted. The work of life continues in shadow, tending the sick, comforting children, tending fires, listening for signs of trouble in the night. Still, the pause allows the body to recover enough to repeat the cycle. It is a pause, not an escape. Work shapes identity in profound ways. Unlike modern concepts of personal fulfillment or self-expression, identity is inseparable from labor. You are defined by what you do, not by what you feel or desire. The farmer is the one who plows, sows, and harvests. The blacksmith is the one who shapes iron. The household is composed of roles so clearly delineated that each member knows what is expected, and the fulfillment of those expectations defines worth. Over time, repetition becomes a form of mastery. Hands learn precision through constant practice. Eyes discern subtle changes in crops or weather. The mind anticipates patterns and consequences with uncanny accuracy. This mastery is silent, invisible to outsiders, yet it underpins the functioning of the entire household, and by extension, the community. Even as individuals labor endlessly, the effects ripple outward. Crops grown by a peasant feed not only the family but also support lords, towns, and monasteries. Craftsmen produce tools, textiles, and goods that sustain trade and daily life. Labor is both personal and communal, a private effort with public impact. Each task contributes to a chain of survival, an invisible network that links one household to another. Endurance becomes a form of quiet heroism. There are no epics recounting the toils of daily life, no statues to commemorate the hours spent bending over fields or weaving cloth. Yet these lives, shaped by repetitive labor and sustained by persistence, form the backbone of society. Without this constant, unglamorous work, nothing else commerce, culture, politics, religion can function. The physical and mental adaptation to such work is subtle but profound. Pain is normalized. Fatigue is tolerated. Strategy and planning are embedded in the rhythm of daily life. Patience, foresight, and resourcefulness are not abstract virtues but survival skills. People become attuned to the smallest details, the texture of soil, the behavior of animals, the weight of a grain sack. Small errors carry real consequences, teaching attention to detail without explicit instruction. Seasons dictate the intensity and focus of labor. Spring brings planting and preparation. Summer brings maintenance. Autumn brings the harvest. Winter brings repair and conservation. Each period has its pressures and rewards. Success is measured not by accolades but by the continuity of life. Surviving winter, feeding children, storing enough seed for the next planting. Even in times of plenty, work does not abate entirely. Maintenance, care, and vigilance are constant. Abundance is temporary. The lessons of scarcity linger. The memory of hunger, crop failure, or illness informs decisions long after the immediate threat has passed. Prudence becomes habitual, embedded into the way people approach every task. Among households, social bonds are reinforced through labor. Fields are tended communally. Workshops share apprentices and materials. Families rely on one another to meet obligations that no single person can fulfill alone. Labor is a form of cooperation, a practical interdependence that sustains life in ways that go unnoticed by modern historians but were vital in their time. The human experience of labor shapes more than survival, it shapes perspective. Those who have worked relentlessly learn to value continuity over excitement, endurance over novelty. Achievements are small, practical, and often invisible to the outside world. Yet these small accomplishments accumulate, day after day, year after year, creating a life sustained not by spectacle but by persistence. Looking back, it becomes clear that medieval work is not merely physical exertion. It is a lens through which the world is understood. Time is measured in tasks completed rather than hours spent. Worth is measured in contribution rather than recognition. Life is assessed in survival and endurance rather than pleasure or fame. The mundane is monumental because it enables everything else. And so, when you rise for the next day, exhausted yet unbroken, you are reminded of the quiet truth of medieval existence. The measure of a person is not the stories they leave behind or the victories they claim, but the persistence of their labor, repeated day after day, shaping themselves, their household, and the society around them. Perhaps the most remarkable legacy of such a life is its simplicity. Labor done well, endured faithfully, and repeated without complaint, forms the bedrock upon which civilization itself rests. And that raises a subtle but persistent question. If the weight of society rests on countless invisible, unremarkable actions, how many lives like those of medieval workers have quietly shaped history without ever being remembered? Story 5. Water, waste, and the scent of survival. You wake to another day, but before labor begins or bread is prepared, you are reminded of one of the simplest yet most pressing realities of medieval life: water. It is everywhere and nowhere. Streams, wells, and rain barrels serve as sources for drinking, cooking, washing, and animal care, but they are never truly separate. Clean water is rare, and its scarcity shapes every action, every household decision, every illness and death. In towns, water is often shared. Wells are communal, lined with stone and guarded by ropes or pulleys. People carry buckets, jostling for position during busy hours. In villages, the river may be closer, but it serves multiple purposes: laundry, bathing, irrigation, and sometimes disposal. The same water sustains life and spreads disease. Its use requires constant negotiation, not only of access but of timing and purpose. Cleanliness is not vanity, it is survival. A bucket of water used to wash hands is not luxury, it is a tool to prevent illness. Yet true hygiene is almost impossible. Soap exists but is scarce and costly. Laundry is done sparingly, primarily on Sundays or before market days. Clothes are scrubbed in rivers or basins and hung to dry, but the fabric is coarse and prone to retaining dirt. Odor is inevitable. You accept it as normal. Bathing is occasional, though it varies by region and status. Some may bathe weekly or monthly, some rarely. Public bathhouses exist in larger towns, but these are also social spaces where disease can spread quickly. Water is warmed with fire or left cold in stone tubs. The act is functional, ritualized, and brief. You bathe not for comfort, but for health or for modesty in public interactions. Human waste is another constant consideration. Most people rely on simple latrines, privies, or cesspits. In villages, waste may be deposited outside the home, often near fields for fertilizer, but sometimes dangerously close to living areas. In towns, communal latrines are used, often located above rivers or streams to carry waste away. Smell is pervasive. Contamination is frequent. Sewer systems are rudimentary and disease spreads easily. Managing waste requires awareness and cooperation. Wells must be protected from contamination. Cesspits must be emptied regularly, often by the poorest members of society, an unpleasant but essential task. Waste is never distant. It is part of daily life, intertwined with water, food, and habitation. You learn early that survival is as much about avoiding filth as about producing food or maintaining shelter. Animals compound the challenge. Chickens, pigs, goats, and cows live near or inside homes. Their waste is constant, tracked into living spaces and sometimes mixed with human waste. Floors are swept daily, but dust, straw, and dung mingle. The resulting smell is normal, almost comforting in its familiarity, though it signals ongoing exposure to germs. Your body adapts. Your nose dulls to the odor, your stomach adapts to local microbes, your mind accepts the conditions. Disease is always nearby. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and parasitic infections are common, spread through water and waste. Mothers watch children carefully. Neighbors alert one another to outbreaks. Religious authorities preach cleanliness as a moral duty and a protection against spiritual impurity, linking the physical world and divine order. Yet practical knowledge often outweighs theory. Boiling water, rotating latrine sites, and separating animals from living spaces are the methods that save lives. Cooking and eating are closely tied to water and sanitation. Pottage must be stirred carefully, meat rinsed when possible, vegetables scrubbed or boiled. The quality of water directly affects taste and safety. Wells near cesspits or rivers are avoided when illness is suspected. Rainwater is collected if available. Even the simplest meals require vigilance. Survival is always practical, never indulgent. Trade and social interaction influence sanitation too. Markets offer water for washing, sometimes even public baths or fountains, but they also concentrate people, animals, and waste. Pilgrims, merchants, and travelers introduce new microbes and new practices, sometimes improving hygiene, sometimes spreading infection. The local household must adapt continuously, balancing tradition with observation and experience. Religious practices intersect with cleanliness. Ritual washing, hand washing before meals, and purification rites guide behavior, providing structure and justification for attention to hygiene. Pilgrimage and monastic routines reinforce regular washing, yet the average peasant integrates these lessons into the broader practical task of survival. Faith, like labor and diet, shapes daily routines. Despite precautions, illness is frequent, especially in childhood. Those who survive early years adapt, immunity builds slowly. Yet the memory of disease shapes behavior. Wells are protected, water is boiled, refuse managed diligently. Hygiene is a constant mental calculation. One misstep may not be fatal today, but it could be tomorrow. By evening, the cumulative effect of water use, waste management, and exposure becomes evident. Floors are damp from washing, smells linger, and bodies are soiled from labor and play. Yet life continues. Meals are shared, tools repaired, animals fed, and fire tended. Sanitation is not perfect, but it is functional. You adapt to imperfection, learning to thrive within it rather than despair. And as you lay down at night, tired from work, cognizant of what you have eaten, and aware of the microbes that surround you, a quiet thought arises. In a world where clean water is precious, where waste is omnipresent, and where survival depends on constant vigilance, what does living well even mean? As the day progresses, water and waste demand constant attention, quietly shaping every action. Life in the medieval world is a delicate negotiation with risk, and survival is often about small, repetitive practices rather than heroic interventions. Each choice about where to fetch water, how to prepare food, or where to deposit waste can have consequences days or weeks later. Illness is never abstract, it is immediate, tangible, and sometimes deadly. Households develop routines out of necessity. Wells and streams are monitored for debris, discoloration, or unusual smells. Rainwater is collected carefully, often in barrels lined with straw or clay to filter impurities. Water used for washing dishes or preparing meals may be boiled when possible, though fuel is precious and boiling everything is rare. Even simple pottage requires calculation. The water must be sufficient to cook the grain without wasting valuable fuel, yet clean enough to avoid contamination. Sanitation is a constant concern for families living in close quarters with animals. Chickens, pigs, goats, and cows are essential for sustenance, but their proximity introduces daily hazards. Their droppings mix with soil and floor surfaces, tracked into the home by bare feet or simple sandals. You sweep and clean as best you can, but perfection is impossible. The smell, ever present, becomes a background signal of life. Uncomfortable, unavoidable, yet informative. It tells you where animals have been, where to avoid, and when extra caution is necessary. Children quickly learn these lessons through observation and minor instruction. Toddlers are corrected when they touch unclean surfaces or handle food carelessly. Older children may assist in maintaining wells, cleaning floors, or tending livestock. Training is subtle. It is integrated into the rhythm of survival. Each generation inherits not just tools, but the patterns and habits necessary to negotiate the risks of contamination. Illness is always close, even when it is invisible. Dysentery, typhoid, and parasitic infections circulate quietly. Outbreaks flare unpredictably. During epidemics, even the smallest lapse drinking from a contaminated stream, failing to remove waste from living areas promptly can have devastating consequences. Families respond with vigilance. Wells are cordoned, refuse is moved farther from homes, and food preparation is scrutinized more carefully. Knowledge becomes a shield, even if partial, against an otherwise relentless threat. Social hierarchies influence access to clean water and hygienic practices. Wealthier households may have private wells, cisterns, or rudimentary filtration methods. They may employ servants to handle waste or maintain clean water stores. Poorer families rely on communal wells, shared rivers, or rainwater collection with minimal protection. Yet wealth does not guarantee safety. Contamination can travel through trade, neighbors, or livestock. Awareness and diligence are equally important regardless of status. Religious practices provide structure and moral reinforcement. Ritual washing before meals, ablutions before prayer, and periodic bathing are encouraged. In monasteries, cleanliness is both spiritual and practical. The health of the community depends on strict adherence to routine. For laypeople, these rituals intersect with survival rather than being purely devotional. Cleanliness becomes an act of prudence, moral duty, and practical care all at once. Animals remain both partners and hazards. You feed and water them, clean their shelters, and manage their waste. In winter, manure is collected for fuel or fertilizer. The smell is overpowering, yet the material is essential. You tolerate discomfort as a necessary trade-off for survival. You learn to recognize which odors signal disease in livestock and which are simply part of life. Ignoring these cues risks both health and livelihood. Cooking and food preparation are constant negotiations with risk. Grain may carry mold. Water may harbor pathogens. Vegetables may be tainted by soil. Meat is often salted or smoked, reducing spoilage but not eliminating it entirely. Pottage, bread, and soups are monitored not just for taste, but for safety. Every meal is a calculated risk mitigated by careful observation and learned experience. Even communal spaces like town markets or public wells are sources of both opportunity and danger. Water can be fetched, traded goods can be acquired, but crowds concentrate contamination. People and animals mix and pathogens move silently. Observant households anticipate risk, timing trips to avoid congestion, washing hands and vessels whenever possible. Precaution is habitual. The cumulative effect of living with constant exposure to waste and uncertain water is subtle but profound. Bodies adapt. Immunity builds slowly. Sensory awareness sharpens. Minds learn vigilance. You develop an intuition for cleanliness that extends beyond simple rules. You read smells, textures, appearances, and behavior to make decisions that protect yourself and your household. Yet despite all precautions, infection and illness remain part of life. Children fall sick. Mothers tend them at home because professional medical care is distant, expensive, or rudimentary. Epidemics claim lives unpredictably. You accept mortality as part of the environment while doing everything possible to delay it. Survival is measured not in comfort or leisure, but in incremental success. A child reaching adulthood, a household completing winter without major sickness, a spring harvest that arrives on time. Even as evening falls, water and waste demand attention. The last buckets are drawn, floors swept, livestock checked, cesspits maintained. You may smell the accumulated odor of the day, but it is accepted rather than lamented. The household functions, the family persists, and the body, though weary, has adapted yet again to the environment's challenges. In this constant negotiation, the medieval person develops a practical philosophy. Life is a series of risks to be managed rather than a problem to be solved definitively. Hygiene is never perfect. Water is never completely safe. Illness is inevitable. Yet vigilance, adaptation, and endurance make survival possible. And in the quiet moments before sleep, when the smell of animals, food, and life mingles in the air, you are left with the same enduring question. When survival depends on constant negotiation with the very elements that sustain you, how do people find dignity, comfort, or peace in everyday existence? Morning arrives as it always does, bringing with it the familiar smells of the household: smoke from the fire, damp straw, sweat, and the lingering presence of animals and waste. You inhale deeply, not in disgust, but in recognition. These odors are markers of life, indicators of activity, and subtle warnings of potential danger. Living in this environment teaches you to read them like a language. Every scent conveys information: which water is safest, which food is still edible, which areas are cleaner or more contaminated. Survival is built on attention to these small, often invisible signals. As the day begins, water remains central to every action. You draw from the well or the river, mindful of contamination. Buckets are carefully handled, rinsed when possible, and stored to prevent further risk. Cooking requires observation. The water must boil long enough to kill some pathogens but not waste precious fuel. Bread dough is mixed carefully to avoid adding unclean water. Every step, no matter how mundane, carries implications for health. You cannot afford carelessness. Waste management continues alongside labor. Human and animal excrement is collected, composted, or moved to prevent contamination of living spaces and water sources. Floors are swept, straw replaced, and refuse managed meticulously. Each household develops its own system, honed over generations, balancing efficiency, safety, and practicality. These practices may seem crude today, but they are the product of centuries of adaptation to a challenging environment. Animals, ever present, complicate this balance. Chickens scratch near the hearth, pigs wander in and out, goats are tethered but curious. Their behavior is predictable yet never entirely controllable. You adjust daily, ensuring that their needs are met without compromising your household's sanitation. Failure has consequences. Disease spreads rapidly, food stores are contaminated, and survival is jeopardized. Living alongside animals teaches you vigilance and respect. Every action is a negotiation with their instincts and the risks they carry. The body, accustomed to this environment, becomes resilient. Children grow up with immunity to many local pathogens. Adults develop practical immunity and tolerance. The nose becomes less sensitive to smells that might overwhelm an untrained observer. The mind learns constant assessment: water, food, waste, animals, neighbors. All of these factors are interlinked, and survival depends on maintaining that balance. Comfort is secondary, practicality is paramount. Even in wealthy households where water is stored in cisterns and servants manage waste, risks persist. Contamination is never entirely avoidable. Disease can travel along trade routes, through visitors, or via animals. Status offers tools to mitigate risk, not eliminate it. Observant medieval people, regardless of class, developed habits that emphasized foresight, attention to detail, and careful observation. Hygiene is as much mental as physical, a constant calibration between effort, resources, and safety. Religious practice continues to shape behavior. Ritual washing, prayers before meals, and purification rites guide daily attention to water and cleanliness. Faith reinforces vigilance. Caring for the body is both practical and spiritual. Yet even these practices must coexist with survival imperatives. Baths, ablutions, and ceremonial cleanings are subordinated to labor, food preparation, and tending animals. Life is a hierarchy of needs, and hygiene, while important, competes with more urgent demands. Illness remains an ever-present threat. Diarrhea, fevers, and skin infections are common. When a child falls sick, adults respond immediately, sometimes with herbs, sometimes with careful attention to water and food. Recovery is precarious. Mortality is high. Death leaves its own imprint on the household. Burial practices, body handling, and purification rituals all intersect with the reality of disease management. Families learn not only to care for the living, but also to prepare for inevitable loss. Through this constant negotiation with water and waste, medieval people develop a subtle mastery of their environment. They learn to anticipate hazards, improvise solutions, and teach these skills to the next generation. Life is never secure, but it is manageable through observation, adaptation, and endurance. Survival depends on diligence, attention to detail, and the ability to accept that perfection is impossible. As evening falls, the household gathers for a simple meal: pottage, bread, perhaps a bit of cheese or salted meat. Every bite is filtered through knowledge of water, cooking, and storage practices. You have not eaten luxuriously, but you have eaten safely. The body, tired from labor and alertness, receives sustenance without indulgence. This is the reward for careful attention to a world that is simultaneously life-giving and hazardous. As you prepare for sleep, water is drawn, floors are swept, animals are checked, and buckets are covered. Hygiene and vigilance do not end when labor ceases, they carry into the night. The smells of life, animal, human, cooking, waste linger, but you no longer perceive them as intrusive. They are markers of survival, signals that your household functions despite constant challenges. You have adapted, as every generation before you did, to live amid the smells, the risks, and the labor that life requires. And in these moments, you understand a quiet, profound truth. Survival in the medieval world is not about comfort, luxury, or isolation. It is about endurance, attentiveness, and skillful negotiation with a world that provides nourishment and hazard in equal measure. Life is a daily calibration, a practice of observation and adaptation, a subtle dance with water, waste, and the living environment. The final thought lingers as you drift toward sleep. When survival depends on mastering the ordinary, the smells, the labor, the risks, what then does it mean to live fully? Not in abundance, not in comfort, but in awareness, endurance, and quiet mastery of the environment itself. Perhaps this is the truest legacy of those who lived in a world where water and waste defined daily life: resilience, subtlety, and the art of existing within limits that modern life can scarcely imagine. Story 6. The smell of smoke, cooking and heating in medieval homes. You wake to the smell of smoke, a constant presence in every medieval household. It is not the aromatic scent of a modern fireplace or carefully curated hearth. It is thick, pervasive, unavoidable, and essential. Fire is the lifeblood of the home. It provides warmth, light, and the ability to cook food. Without it, survival would be precarious, especially in colder months when temperatures drop sharply and illness is more likely to take hold. In most homes, the hearth occupies the center of daily life. It is a simple construction, a stone or brick fire pit, often surrounded by soot-blackened walls, with a chimney or simple venting system, if any at all. Smoke rarely leaves entirely. It hangs in the air, clinging to wood, straw, textiles, and even skin. Over time, you learn to tolerate it. Your eyes water, your hair smells of it, but it is preferable to freezing or going hungry. Fuel is the constant concern of the household. Wood is the primary source, collected from nearby forests, felled by hand and cut into manageable lengths. Dried animal dung or peat may supplement wood in some regions. Every spark, every log is precious. Too little and the home is cold. Too much and smoke fills the room excessively. Fire management is a skill passed down through generations. How to start a flame quickly, how to keep it alive overnight, how to balance smoke and heat. Cooking occurs over the same flame that heats the home. Pottage, bread, roasted meat, and vegetables all share the same fire. Pots hang over chains or rest on trivets. Spits rotate slowly to cook meat evenly. Smoke permeates the food, affecting taste and preservation. You learn to manage timing carefully, ensuring that meals cook thoroughly while fuel lasts and smoke does not overwhelm those nearby. The hearth is also social and practical. Families gather near it to eat, work, and socialize. Children warm themselves as adults prepare meals or repair tools. In single-room homes, the fire serves multiple functions: cooking, heating, and even drying clothes or herbs. This constant use reinforces the centrality of fire in everyday life. To lose the hearth, even temporarily, is to risk comfort, nutrition, and safety. Fire is never left unattended, particularly at night. Even when the household sleeps, embers are banked and monitored to prevent the house from burning. The risk is real. A stray spark can destroy thatch, timber, and the possessions of an entire family. At the same time, fire is fragile. Too much dampness, too little kindling or poor ventilation can render it nearly useless. Maintaining a flame is both art and necessity, a daily ritual that determines the rhythm of life. Smoke, while unpleasant, serves as a signal. Its color, density, and smell indicate the health of the fire and the quality of the fuel. Dark smoke may signal damp wood or inefficient burning, while a steady, thin wisp suggests a well-tended flame. You learn to read these subtle cues instinctively, adjusting logs, repositioning pots, or opening vents without conscious deliberation. Experience teaches you to respond quickly and effectively to maintain heat and nutrition. Even in wealthier households, the dynamics of fire are similar, though slightly more refined. Larger hearths, multiple chimneys, and metalwork improve efficiency. Kitchens may be separate from living spaces, reducing smoke exposure, but the labor of maintaining heat and cooking remains substantial. Servants and household staff take primary responsibility, yet the household's survival is still intimately connected to fire management. Seasonality shapes how fire is used. Winter demands constant warmth. Smoke is nearly inescapable. Summer may allow for outdoor cooking or reduced fire use, but vigilance continues. Boiling water, cooking meals, and heating space remain necessary regardless of season. Fire cannot be deferred, it is intertwined with food, health, and comfort. Children grow up familiar with fire's presence. They learn to fetch fuel, stir pots, and tend embers. Accidents happen: burns, smoke inhalation, or fires breaking out. Lessons are learned quickly because consequences are immediate and sometimes severe. Yet exposure also teaches respect and competence. You understand fire not as an abstract danger, but as a tool that can nurture, warm, and sustain when handled correctly. Fire's presence shapes other aspects of life. Smoke stains walls and ceilings, clothing absorbs the odor, hair smells faintly of ash. Windows and doors are open to ventilate, though drafts can chill the occupants. Cooking methods adapt to the limitations of the hearth. Slow simmering, roasting over spits, and the layering of pots to conserve fuel. Smoke is a constant companion, an irritant, and a reminder of life's dependence on flame. The labor surrounding fire extends beyond the hearth itself. Wood must be chopped, carried, dried, and stacked. Pots and utensils must be maintained, ashes swept, hearths cleaned. Fire is never simply on, it must be tended, adjusted, and safeguarded. The household is organized around its energy. Labor, sleep, and meals all revolve around the hearth's rhythm. And yet, for all its nuisance, fire is essential. Its smoke, heat, and light are inseparable from comfort and survival. You cannot imagine a home without it. It is intrusive, omnipresent, and sometimes irritating, but it is life itself. The medieval household's relationship with fire is not casual. It is intimate, practical, and continuous. As evening approaches, the hearth takes on a new role. Families gather near it, children rest while adults prepare the next day's food, and embers are managed for overnight warmth. Smoke continues to fill the space, but it is tolerated. You have adapted. The smell, the heat, the constant attention, all of it is woven into life itself. And yet, even as you manage the hearth with practiced skill, a thought emerges. In a world where smoke is omnipresent, fire is indispensable, and mistakes can be fatal. How did medieval people endure such constant vigilance without exhaustion or despair? How did they balance survival, comfort, and labor in a world defined by heat, smoke, and endless preparation? The morning begins not with a sunrise, but with embers. You stir the coals left from the previous night, adding small pieces of kindling and carefully coaxing flames to life. In some homes, the fire has burned through the cold hours, carefully banked by someone who sacrificed their own rest. In others, embers have died, and the household must start over, scraping and striking sparks until smoke rises. This is the first labor of the day, to secure heat before any other task can begin. Fuel dominates thought. Firewood is precious, and its acquisition is an unending chore. You or someone in your household walks to the forest, chops wood with a hand axe, and hauls it home, often over uneven terrain. Peat, straw, and dung supplement wood, but each has limitations. Peat burns slowly but produces smoke and requires preparation. Dung is abundant yet smelly and may carry disease. Straw ignites quickly but burns fast. Every source requires judgment. Which combination provides the warmth and cooking capability necessary for the household's needs? Winter magnifies these challenges. Frost bites early in the morning, snow makes travel to forests or fields difficult, and nights are long, requiring constant heat to protect children, the elderly, and the sick. Fire is both warmth and survival. Smoke fills the room, staining skin and textiles, but it is a price paid willingly because the alternative is far worse. You grow accustomed to the irritation. Eyes water, clothes smell, hair reeks, yet the body learns to tolerate it. The mind adjusts. The household continues. Cooking itself is a continuous negotiation with the fire. Pottage simmers for hours, often in multiple pots over different parts of the hearth. Meat is roasted on spits, sometimes requiring constant attention to ensure even cooking. Bread is baked in clay ovens, heated by coals pushed inside and monitored carefully. Smoke influences flavor, sometimes unpleasantly, but it also helps preserve food by reducing moisture or deterring pests. Cooking is labor-intensive, requiring vigilance, skill, and timing. Mistakes have immediate consequences: burned food, wasted fuel, or, in worse cases, a fire that spreads uncontrollably. The hearth's heat also serves secondary functions. Water is boiled for cleaning, clothes and blankets are dried, and herbs are smoked for preservation or medicinal purposes. You quickly learn to manage multiple tasks simultaneously, placing pots in different positions over the flames, adjusting logs to balance temperature, and ensuring smoke does not become oppressive. Life revolves around this central labor: cooking, heating, and maintaining the hearth. Each action must be precise, deliberate, and continuous. Children participate, observing and assisting with small tasks. They carry wood, stir pots, or tend embers under supervision. These lessons are practical and essential. Mistakes are corrected gently yet firmly because the fire demands respect. Burns, soot in eyes, or small accidents are inevitable, but they are also part of learning. Fire is never trivial. It is simultaneously friend and threat, source of warmth and danger, essential to life and survival. Evenings are the most delicate period. Embers must be banked to last the night, especially in homes without central heating. Too little fuel and the household shivers through darkness. Too much and smoke may suffocate sleepers or ignite thatched roofs. Fire management becomes almost meditative. Logs are adjusted, sparks encouraged, coals rearranged. Vigilance continues even as weariness seeps into the body. Sleep is partial and interrupted, a concession to the needs of warmth, safety, and cooking. Communal fire practices sometimes emerge, especially in larger villages or towns. Neighbors may share smokehouses, ovens, or communal kitchens. Wood collection can become cooperative, particularly in winter when resources are scarce. Shared labor reduces individual burden but introduces new considerations: whose fire burns where, how smoke travels, and how responsibilities are divided fairly. Even communal practices revolve around the same principles: constant attention, careful management, and adaptation to circumstances. Fire also dictates social interactions within the household. Conversations, work, and rest are structured around the hearth. Meals occur when flames are sufficient for cooking. Laundry is dried near embers. Children gather around the warmth to study, play, or rest. The rhythm of life aligns with the fire's needs: feeding, tending, adjusting, and preserving. Smoke is omnipresent, but so too is the sense of comfort and community it enables. Throughout all this, you develop intimate knowledge of the household's microclimate: which corner retains heat, where smoke pools, how coals react to different fuels, and which positions of pots produce the best results. Mastery of fire is practical, sensory, and constant. It is never complete. Each day brings small variations, and each winter presents new challenges. Skill develops slowly through repetition, observation, and minor errors corrected with care. By nightfall, the hearth has been tended countless times. Embers glow, pots are emptied or covered, and the household gathers in the warmth. Smoke continues to drift through the room, settling in hair and clothing, but its presence is now a sign of survival. Work continues through labor, observation, and adaptation. Without fire, life would be far more tenuous. With fire, even the coldest nights are survivable. And as you finally rest, soot-stained and tired, a reflection lingers. In a world where warmth, food, and survival are inseparable from smoke and flame, how did medieval people balance the constant labor of tending fire with the other demands of daily life? How did the omnipresent smoke become a backdrop to childhood, family, and survival, shaping not only daily routines but the rhythms of existence itself? Night deepens and the hearth glows with a steady warmth, the room heavy with smoke and the smell of charred wood. By now your eyes, throat, and hair have adjusted. The sting of smoke is a background presence, unremarkable, almost comforting. You have spent the day coaxing, and managing the fire, understanding it intimately not as a tool in isolation, but as the central axis of survival, labor, and domestic life. Fire is never a solitary concern. The household revolves around it. Children sit nearby, watching pots of pottage simmer, learning how to adjust coals or lift lids to check the contents. Adults tend other tasks, mending tools, spinning yarn, or repairing clothing while keeping the flames alive. Smoke mingles with activity. It stings the eyes, irritates the lungs, and stains the walls, but its presence ensures that cooking is possible, warmth is maintained, and comfort persists through the chill of evening. Fuel management is constant. Wood is rotated, coals shifted, embers banked for overnight survival. Too little attention and the fire dwindles. Too much, and the room fills with choking smoke or sparks threaten the thatch roof. This delicate balance requires knowledge, attention, and experience. The medieval household learns through trial and error, through repetition, and through the quiet transmission of skills from parent to child. Meals are tied directly to fire. Bread is baked slowly, meat roasted on a spit, pottage stirred for hours. Every dish depends on the fire's consistency. Uneven heat can spoil food. Too little warmth can leave it undercooked. Fire dictates timing, structure, and rhythm of domestic life. There is no distinction between labor and necessity. Cooking, heating, and survival are inseparable. Smoke, though ever present, is informative. Its color, density, and smell indicate how the fire is burning. A thin, rising wisp signals efficiency. Thick, dark smoke warns of damp wood or poor ventilation. You learn to interpret these signs instinctively, adjusting logs, stoking coals, or moving pots. This skill is subtle but essential. Survival depends not on heroism, but on observation, adaptation, and careful attention to small, continuous signals. Evening chores extend beyond cooking. Ashes are removed or banked, hearths are cleaned, utensils maintained. Water is boiled for drinking or cleaning. Fires are monitored for embers that may smolder too long or drift too close to flammable materials. Children may carry small pieces of wood or stir small pots, learning responsibility and the rhythm of household life. Each member participates, and each contributes to the continuity of the fire. The fire also defines social and emotional life. Families gather around it, sharing the warmth and comfort it provides. Conversations happen in its glow, plans for the next day are discussed, and children listen and learn. Even the smell, initially harsh and intrusive, becomes part of domestic identity. The household recognizes its presence as both a nuisance and a lifeline. Smoke and warmth are inseparable from the experience of medieval life. Winter heightens these dynamics. Nights are long, cold, and unforgiving. Fires must burn steadily, often banked strategically to last until morning. Fuel becomes precious, and rationing is practiced with care. Every ember carries weight. The household adapts, coordinating tasks, sleep, and meals to make optimal use of heat. Smoke is a constant companion, but it signals survival rather than discomfort. The smell of burning wood becomes a reassurance that life continues. Even in wealthier homes with multiple hearths, chimneys, and more sophisticated cooking implements, the principles remain. Fire must be tended, fuel managed, and smoke monitored. Servants or specialized cooks may assume primary responsibility, but the logic of survival, timely heat, cooked food, and vigilance against accidental conflagration remains universal. Mastery of fire is practical, constant, and essential. Over time, households develop a subtle expertise: which logs burn longest, how to balance different types of fuel, how to cook multiple dishes simultaneously, and how to minimize harmful smoke exposure while maximizing warmth. This knowledge is shared orally, demonstrated through practice, and passed down across generations. It is learned slowly, quietly, and incrementally, becoming second nature. And yet, the medieval relationship with fire is not purely functional. It shapes perception, rhythm, and the structure of daily life. Morning, afternoon, and evening are defined by the state of the hearth. Labor, meals, and rest are calibrated around the flame. Smoke and soot, though inconvenient, become markers of time and activity. The smell of smoke is inseparable from the concept of home itself, entwined with safety, survival, and continuity. At night, as the household settles near the warm glow of embers, you recognize the duality of fire. It is comfort and hazard, necessity and labor, mundane and essential. Smoke, heat, and flame dictate life's rhythms, yet also provide the stability and warmth that make endurance possible. Living with fire requires vigilance, skill, patience, and adaptability. It is a constant negotiation with an element both generous and unforgiving. And so, as sleep finally claims you, soot-stained, tired, and alert, a reflective thought lingers. In a world where survival depends on managing flame, smoke, and fuel, how does the daily intimacy with such a dangerous, essential element shape people's perception of home, security, and the rhythm of life? What subtle lessons about patience, foresight, and quiet mastery are transmitted through this daily engagement with fire, shaping not only survival, but the very character of a generation? Story 7. Medieval medicine, herbs, bloodletting, and endless waiting. You awaken with a slight ache in your head or a chill in your limbs, but in the medieval world, minor discomforts can escalate quickly if ignored. Illness is not an abstract concern. It is an ever-present shadow. Life is precarious, and the body is a fragile vessel easily overwhelmed by infection, malnutrition, or injury. Medicine exists, but it is primitive, time-consuming, and often more ritual than cure. Surviving the medieval world requires vigilance, endurance, and a deep understanding of both the limits of your body and the uncertain remedies available. For most people, medical knowledge is rudimentary. Households rely on a combination of folk remedies, herbs, and guidance from local healers or clergy. You learn early which plants soothe stomach pain, which roots may reduce fever, and which salves can ease cuts and bruises. Observation over time teaches effectiveness or the lack of it. The process is slow, tedious, and often frustrating. Relief is not immediate, and failure is common. Yet, repetition and careful attention allow you to survive illnesses that might otherwise be fatal. The humblest of households often maintains a small collection of medicinal herbs: chamomile for digestion, sage for wounds, yarrow for fevers. These plants are cultivated, gathered, dried, and stored with care. Knowledge of their use is practical, passed down from parent to child. Preparation is laborious. Leaves crushed, decoctions boiled, poultices needed. Even in small amounts, these remedies demand constant attention and methodical repetition to be effective. Bloodletting is another staple of medieval medicine, especially among wealthier classes or those following humoral theory. The belief that illness stems from imbalances in bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile dictates treatment. A physician or barber surgeon may puncture a vein to release blood, believing that restoring balance will alleviate disease. The procedure is slow and deliberate. You endure it as a necessary, though uncomfortable, intervention. Success is uncertain. Sometimes the patient recovers. Sometimes the procedure weakens them further. Waiting and observation dominate this practice. Visits to physicians are infrequent and expensive. Most care occurs at home, managed by family members or local healers. Treatments combine empirical knowledge with superstition. Prayers, charms, and rituals accompany herbal remedies. Time, patience, and vigilance are as important as skill. Healing is slow. Recovery may take days, weeks, or months, and setbacks are common. There is little room for impatience. You learn endurance through repeated encounters with illness and slow restoration. Diet plays a crucial role in health, though often indirectly. Malnutrition weakens the body, making infections more deadly. Meals are repetitive: bread, pottage, vegetables, small portions of meat or fish when available. The timing and combination of foods are observed closely. Certain herbs are added not only for flavor but for their presumed medicinal properties. Nutrition is both prevention and treatment, practiced through daily attention rather than innovation. Infections are common and deadly. Cuts, scrapes, and burns, which might be minor today, can lead to gangrene or systemic illness. Childbirth carries extraordinary risk. Many women die in labor, and infants fail to survive beyond the first year. Epidemics spread quickly. Smallpox, plague, dysentery, and influenza circulate with devastating efficiency. You learn to monitor symptoms, isolate the sick when possible, and employ every tool at your disposal, from poultices to prayers, to preserve life. Patience is central to medieval medicine. Remedies require time to work, and recovery is incremental. Herbs must be administered repeatedly, treatments revisited and adjusted. Observation is continuous: the color of skin, the temperature of the body, the sound of breathing. Every small sign is a piece of data informing action or inaction. Waiting is not passive. It is an active form of labor, intertwined with care and survival. Even in towns with apothecaries and rudimentary hospitals, medicine is a slow, ritualized process. Remedies are prepared carefully, often under the supervision of learned practitioners, but the basic principles remain unchanged. Time, repetition, and careful monitoring are as crucial as the medicine itself. Speed is not a feature. Endurance and attention are. Life is measured not in dramatic cures but in incremental maintenance and survival. Religious and magical practices intersect with practical care. Holy water, prayers, incantations, and charms are often employed alongside herbs and bloodletting. These interventions provide both hope and structure. Healing is as much about belief and ritual as it is about observable effect. The mind participates alongside the body in recovery, and the integration of spiritual practice helps manage fear and uncertainty. Even mundane household care is rigorous. Cleaning wounds, changing bandages, boiling water for sterilization, these tasks are repeated continuously. Attention to cleanliness, even if imperfect, is vital for survival. Mistakes carry consequences, teaching vigilance and shaping understanding of the body. Each small act of care, stirring a decoction, applying a poultice, monitoring a fever, is both labor and life insurance. As the day ends, the household rests, but the work of care never fully stops. The sick must be checked at intervals, temperatures noted, remedies replenished. Patience, observation, and endurance continue through the night. Illness is a long, quiet presence demanding constant attention. Survival is incremental, achieved through meticulous repetition, careful monitoring, and the persistent application of knowledge passed down through generations. And as you lie down, aware of aches, smells, and the faint aroma of boiled herbs, a persistent thought arises. In a world where health is fragile and medicine slow, where patience and endurance are as vital as skill, what does it mean to survive? Is survival simply avoiding death, or is it the continuous labor of care, observation, and subtle mastery of the body's frailty? Morning light filters into the small, smoky room, but the household's attention is drawn not to the sun, but to the fragile, feverish figure resting on the straw mattress. Illness is patient, methodical, and often imperceptible in its early stages. The medieval body is never taken for granted. Every cough, shiver, or discoloration of the skin carries significance. You observe constantly because survival depends on noticing the smallest details long before catastrophe arrives. You begin with the familiar tools of household care. Bowls of boiled water sit ready for washing wounds. Herbs chamomile, sage, yarrow are prepared meticulously, either steeped into teas, crushed into poultices, or infused into oils. Each preparation follows rituals learned from parents, neighbors, or local healers. The work is repetitive, painstaking, and often odor-laden. You crush leaves with a mortar and pestle, rub ointments carefully onto scrapes, and reheat decoctions. There is no haste, only precision and patience. Observation is continuous and methodical. Skin tone, breathing, pulse, and posture are noted repeatedly throughout the day. Small changes lessened fever, improved appetite, slight color return signal hope. Deterioration warns of impending danger. You record none of this formally, but memory becomes a living ledger. Experience teaches you to recognize patterns, often in silence and without written instruction. Bloodletting may follow, depending on the perceived imbalance of humors. The procedure is slow, ritualized, and often frightening. A skilled practitioner carefully selects a vein, applies a lancet, and releases blood to restore supposed equilibrium. You hold the patient's hand, offer reassurance, and monitor for signs of weakness or excessive loss. Bloodletting is not instantaneous magic. It is meticulous labor combined with vigilant observation. Its success is uncertain, and its failure is instructive. Faith and ritual are interwoven with physical care. Prayers, charms, and blessings accompany treatments. Holy water is sprinkled. Incantations are recited. These actions serve multiple purposes. They provide hope, structure, and reassurance, and they integrate the spiritual with the practical. You move between the tangible and the symbolic, understanding that healing is not purely physical. Belief is an essential companion to herbs and bloodletting. Dietary management complements medicinal care. The sick receive pottages and broths cooked over the hearth, watered down for easier digestion, enriched with whatever herbs or small quantities of meat are available. Food is a medicine as much as a meal. Feeding, measuring, and timing are acts of survival. You are constantly aware of the body's fragile state and tailor nutrition with deliberate attention. Every spoonful is calculated for nourishment, palatability, and digestibility. Children and apprentices participate in subtle ways, learning through observation. They fetch water, assist in heating decoctions, or stir pots. Each act teaches responsibility and the rhythms of care. Illness is not an interruption of routine, it is integrated into daily labor. The household adapts. Work continues alongside care, and the sick become the focal point around which all activity revolves. The slow pace of medieval medicine shapes perception. Healing is incremental. Days of repetition, observation, and intervention often pass before results are evident. Relief is never dramatic. Recovery is measured in slight improvements, small gains in energy or appetite, or subtle reductions in fever. You learn endurance not just for the patient, but for yourself, as caregiver, observer, and protector. Patience becomes a survival skill as vital as any herb or ointment. Contagion is a constant threat. Households adapt by isolating the sick when possible. Linen and clothing are washed or replaced, floors cleaned, and bedding aired. Smells, filth, and refuse are managed carefully. Exposure to disease is a daily concern, and strategies for minimizing contact are integrated into the rhythm of domestic life. Hygiene is never perfect, but it is practiced consistently and pragmatically. Outside the home, the presence of physicians, barber surgeons, or apothecaries adds another layer of labor and observation. Their interventions, ointments, potions, or bleeding are slow and methodical. Travel to them is effortful, often requiring hours on foot. Decisions about when to seek outside care are themselves calculated, balancing risk, cost, and potential benefit. Even as evening falls, the work does not cease. The patient is monitored, herbs are replenished, wounds cleaned, and remedies reapplied. The household adjusts its schedule around care. Nighttime is punctuated by vigilance, periodic checks of temperature, pulse, and breathing. Sleep is partial for caregivers. Recovery is gradual, measured in hours and days rather than minutes or moments. Through this repetition, endurance, and constant observation, knowledge accumulates. The household becomes adept at reading bodies, interpreting signs, and applying remedies. Even when cures fail, lessons are learned. Which treatments were effective, which herbs soothed pain, and which practices prevented complications. This quiet mastery, slow, iterative, and often invisible, is the foundation of survival in a world where the body is fragile and medical science is limited. And as you lie down for a brief moment of rest, you confront the persistent question that shadows medieval medicine. When healing is slow, uncertain, and intertwined with ritual, labor, and observation, what does it mean to preserve life? Is survival merely endurance, or is it the careful, repeated cultivation of hope and attention in the face of constant fragility? Night settles in the small medieval dwelling, yet care for the sick does not pause. The fire in the hearth glows weakly, illuminating the room with flickering warmth, while the caregiver watches over a patient whose breathing is shallow, whose skin is pale, or whose fever waxes and wanes. Healing in this world is slow and subtle. It is a process defined by repetition, attention, and endurance, rather than dramatic cures or immediate relief. The body is fragile, the remedies imperfect, and time the most crucial factor of all. The work continues through the night. Herbal decoctions are reheated and administered carefully, poultices reapplied to burns or wounds, and bandages adjusted. Each act is methodical, deliberate, and quiet. Caregivers move with the rhythm of patience ingrained over years, honed through repeated experiences of illness, recovery, and loss. Vigilance is as important as skill. Survival is often a matter of watching closely, intervening at the right moment, and knowing when to wait. Observation remains paramount. Every small sign, a slight change in complexion, a shift in breathing, a flicker of energy is noted mentally, guiding subsequent actions. These details are never trivial. Minor improvements or setbacks can signal the difference between life and death. You learn to trust accumulated knowledge, intuition, and the slow processes of care. Healing is not instantaneous. It is an incremental dance between attention, intervention, and natural recovery. Bloodletting or other humoral treatments are performed cautiously when indicated, always with an awareness of the patient's strength. The risk of overbleeding or misjudging the body's limits is high, yet it is part of the system of care. Remedies must be balanced carefully. Each intervention is deliberate, its timing and method informed by experience and observation. Failure is instructive, reinforcing caution and humility. Diet and nutrition continue to be central to recovery. Meals are small, frequent, and tailored to the patient's tolerance. Broths are enriched with herbs thought to improve health. Bread is softened or soaked, and food is portioned with care. Feeding is not merely about sustenance, it is an act of medical intervention. You measure, monitor, and adjust based on subtle feedback from the patient's body. Hygiene, too, is essential and relentless. Bedding is changed, floors swept, and utensils cleaned as best as resources allow. Water is boiled and used sparingly yet attentively. Even minor lapses in cleanliness can worsen outcomes, spreading infection or delaying recovery. The household operates like a living organism, its members attuned to each other, balancing labor, observation, and rest to maintain the fragile equilibrium of health. Spiritual practice remains intertwined with physical care. Prayers, charms, and rituals accompany treatments, offering structure and psychological comfort. The patient's belief in the efficacy of remedies, herbal or ritual, becomes an integral component of recovery. Healing is thus as much about attention, presence, and ritual as it is about herbs or bleeding. You learn that hope, calm, and routine are as vital as any physical intervention. Children and apprentices participate carefully, learning the labor and rhythms of care. They observe, fetch supplies, or perform minor tasks under supervision. Through this process, knowledge is transmitted quietly and practically, ensuring that each generation understands the fragile mechanics of survival. Learning is embedded in daily life, watching, doing, and repeating. Medicine is not abstract, it is lived. Time becomes both ally and adversary. You mark hours not by clocks but by repeated checks of temperature, pulse, and symptoms. Days stretch interminably as the patient recovers slowly. Setbacks are frequent. Progress is measured in incremental gains. Patience is the skill most required, for rushing or inattention can undo hours or days of careful labor. Even with the best care, loss is inevitable. Epidemics, accidents, or severe infections can overwhelm skill and effort. Yet the persistence of routine, observation, and care improves the odds of survival. The quiet, often invisible labor of attention, the repeated application of herbs, bandages, and nourishment, is what sustains life in the face of uncertainty. The medieval household's survival is built less on miraculous cures and more on the methodical, tireless work of repeated care. By night's end, the household rests briefly, but the lessons of the day remain vivid. The body's fragility, the slow rhythm of healing, the importance of observation and patience all shape how life is approached. You have learned endurance, not only for the patient but for yourself, as the labor of vigilance continues. Survival is incremental, painstaking, and sustained through countless small, attentive actions. And in this quiet reflection, the persistent question remains: when life is defined by slow recovery, constant observation, and the limits of human knowledge, what does it mean to be healthy? Is survival merely the absence of death, or is it the ongoing labor of care, vigilance, and subtle mastery of one's fragile body and environment? Perhaps the medieval approach to medicine, tedious, repetitive, patient, teaches a deeper lesson: that the act of sustaining life is itself a skill, a discipline, and a quiet triumph over the ever-present vulnerability of the human body. Story 8. Clothing, dirt, and the endless struggle for cleanliness. You wake in a small room, the straw mattress beneath you coarse and uneven. Your clothing is stiff from yesterday's wear, scented faintly with smoke, sweat, and the lingering traces of labor. In the medieval world, clothing is not merely decorative. It is functional, durable, and constantly tested by the realities of daily life. Dirt is not an exception, it is the rule. Survival, work, and hygiene intertwine in a perpetual negotiation with fabric, labor, and the elements. Most clothing is hand-sewn from wool, linen, or, for wealthier households, finer silks. Wool is heavy and insulating, ideal for cold months, but it traps sweat, dust, and odors. Linen is lighter, cooler, and more comfortable, but less durable. Clothing is repaired constantly, seams mended, holes patched, hems reinforced. A single garment may last years through repeated care and careful attention. Staining is inevitable. Dirt, sweat, and spills mark every surface. Cleanliness is labor-intensive, and absolute cleanliness is impossible. Laundry is a significant task, requiring both physical effort and time. Washing is often done in rivers, communal tubs, or heated basins. Water is precious, sometimes scarce, and often cold or contaminated. Clothing must be scrubbed vigorously, wrung out by hand, and hung to dry. Drying is a challenge, particularly in damp climates or winter months. Fabric may be stiff, rough, and prone to shrinkage. The smell of wet wool, mixed with smoke from the hearth, pervades the home. Laundry is slow, repetitive, and essential, but rarely results in truly clean garments. The process of caring for clothing extends beyond washing. Clothes are brushed to remove dust and debris. Mud and animal waste are scraped from hems and soles. Repaired garments are patched with leftover fabric, creating a patchwork that carries the history of labor and survival. Each stitch, each reinforcement, is an investment of time and skill, a small act of maintenance that preserves both comfort and modesty. Clothing is a tool of survival as much as an indicator of status. Wealth and status affect clothing quality and care, but do not eliminate labor. Richer households may afford finer fabrics, more garments, or servants to perform washing and mending. Still, even the wealthiest garments require attention, and stains, soot, and wear are unavoidable. Clothing reflects the realities of life. Labor, weather, and exposure to dust and smoke shape every fiber. You learn to read these signs: faded patches, frayed hems, or stretched threads, like a map of daily life. Daily activity accelerates wear. Children play in mud, fields, and streets. Adults work in kitchens, fields, and workshops. Clothing absorbs sweat, dirt, and food, becoming both a layer of protection and a vehicle for grime. Washing, drying, and repair are constant, integrated into routines rather than treated as separate tasks. Survival requires understanding the limits of fabric and managing its deterioration with diligence. Stains are inevitable but not merely cosmetic. Muddy hems may carry parasites or germs. Blood from minor injuries seeps into clothing. Food stains harbor bacteria. You develop practices to mitigate risk, rinsing immediately when possible, boiling in water when available, or applying herbal mixtures believed to cleanse or disinfect. Cleanliness is practical, methodical, and never absolute. Hygiene is less a goal than an ongoing negotiation with materials and environment. Clothing also serves social and psychological functions. Garments signal status, occupation, and age. Simple tunics may indicate laborers, while richer fabrics denote wealth. Even the way clothing is maintained, patched neatly, washed when possible, mended with care, communicates values and discipline. Clothing is an extension of the self, worn, repaired, and observed constantly. You negotiate between practicality, modesty, and presentation in every decision about fabric care. Layering is both practical and laborious. In cold climates, multiple layers of wool and linen are worn. Removing and adjusting layers is a daily task, complicated by labor, hygiene, and the limitations of household space. Clothing is seldom fully removed for washing. It is rotated, brushed, and aired as conditions allow. The tactile experience of fabric, rough, stiff, or itchy, shapes perception of comfort and labor. You grow accustomed to compromise. Warmth, durability, and cleanliness are balanced constantly against the realities of life. Footwear presents another challenge. Leather shoes or simple wooden clogs protect against rough terrain, mud, and animal waste, yet they are subject to wear and rot. Repair is continuous. Soles patched, leather treated with fats or oils, and straps reinforced. Feet are rarely fully clean, and shoes carry the odor of sweat, mud, and labor. Practicality dictates care, but comfort is often sacrificed. Survival requires resilience, adaptation, and acceptance of persistent dirt. Even in wealthier households, the struggle with clothing persists. Fine fabrics stain, require careful washing, and may be repaired by skilled seamstresses or servants. Luxury does not eliminate labor. It merely shifts the type of attention required. Clothing remains a constant focus of domestic life, whether for maintenance, social signaling, or personal hygiene. By evening, after a full day of labor, the household may set aside garments for washing, repair, or airing. Clothes are scrubbed, patched, and laid out to dry where possible. Dust, soot, and odor remain, yet the work continues. The cycle repeats daily. Wear, soil, wash, mend, dry, repeat. Life is measured not in cleanliness but in the skillful management of imperfection. And as you settle to rest, aware of the rough texture of wool against your skin, the lingering smell of smoke and labor, and the endless rotation of washing and repair, a question emerges. In a world where dirt, wear, and imperfection are constant companions, how did medieval people maintain dignity, comfort, or a sense of self? What subtle strategies of adaptation allowed them to endure, presenting themselves to the world despite the inevitability of grime and decay? The morning begins with a familiar rhythm. The worn fabrics of yesterday's labored-in clothing are sorted, inspected, and prepared for another day of use. Dirt, sweat, and stains linger stubbornly, yet survival depends on the constant rotation and care of garments. In the medieval household, clothing is not disposable. Every tunic, kirtle, and pair of hose carries the accumulated history of work, weather, and careful mending. The process of repair and rotation is as important as any other labor. It preserves warmth, modesty, and, ultimately, life. Repair is meticulous and ongoing. Frayed seams are reinforced with spare thread, holes patched with fabric from older, worn-out garments, and tiers carefully sewn to prevent further damage. The tools are simple: needles, thread, awls, and scraps of fabric. There is no margin for carelessness. A failed stitch can worsen the damage, rendering clothing unusable in cold weather or exposing skin to injury. Patience and attention to detail are essential. Each mending session may take hours, but it is never optional. It is a daily act of survival. Rotation of garments is a carefully observed practice. You wear a tunic for a day or two, brushing off surface dirt when possible, then set it aside to air out. Clothes rarely receive full washing. Instead, you rely on repeated exposure to fresh air, occasional scrubbing, and patching to maintain them. This rotation extends the life of garments, reduces the risk of fabric weakening, and manages the accumulation of dirt and odor. You quickly learn which fabrics recover better and which deteriorate more quickly under repeated stress. The labor of cleanliness is integrated into other daily tasks. Cooking, tending animals, and farming all soil clothing. Dirt, straw, ashes, and mud accumulate constantly. You develop strategies for managing these inevitable stains, brushing off debris immediately, applying herbal cleansers for persistent spots, or relegating particularly dirty garments to work-only use. The household functions through a hierarchy of utility: clean enough for presentation, repaired enough for function, and durable enough to last through repeated cycles of labor. Children and apprentices participate under supervision, learning not only how to mend but also how to prioritize tasks and manage limited resources. They carry small bundles of thread, retrieve spare fabric, or help scrub simpler items. The act of clothing maintenance is both practical and instructional, transmitting knowledge of labor, resourcefulness, and endurance across generations. Observation and imitation are as important as direct instruction. Footwear remains an ongoing concern. Leather, often soaked, scuffed, and stiff from wear, must be treated with fats, oils, or wax to prevent cracking and extend its life. Wooden clogs require trimming and smoothing to remain functional. Daily inspections are essential. A worn sole can lead to injury. A stiff shoe can impede mobility. You develop a tactile understanding of leather's limits and a visual memory for signs of damage. Footwear is a constant negotiation with material, environment, and necessity. Evenings bring a rhythm of consolidation. Dirty clothes are set aside, patches prepared, and repairs undertaken by candlelight or dim fires. The work is tedious, yet each act strengthens the household's capacity to endure. Garments are rotated with thought, mended with care, and set out to dry or air overnight. The household becomes a choreography of labor, observation, and planning, where each member participates in sustaining comfort and survival. Stains and wear tell stories. Each patch, fray, or discoloration carries the history of labor, accident, or environmental exposure. You learn to read these signs. A threadbare hem reveals repeated kneeling in fields. A faded cuff reflects hours of stirring pottage or handling firewood. A patch at the shoulder hints at a tear caused by carrying heavy loads. Clothing becomes a map of life, an archive of daily experience written in fabric and thread. Hygiene intersects constantly with clothing care. Washing is slow and laborious, performed when water, time, and weather permit. Linen undergarments may be scrubbed and dried while outer layers are brushed and aired. Full cleanliness is rare, and odor is a constant companion. Yet through rotation, repair, and careful management, the household mitigates risks of contamination and discomfort. Cleanliness is practical, not aesthetic. It preserves function, prevents disease, and maintains mobility. Social expectations influence clothing practices. Even within the limitations of labor and dirt, individuals strive to maintain appearances that signal occupation, status, or community membership. Patches are sewn neatly, clothing is brushed when possible, damaged garments are repaired promptly. Presentation is a subtle form of survival, reflecting skill, resourcefulness, and care. It communicates competence to neighbors and guards against social censure. And yet, despite diligence, clothing is never perfect. Dirt accumulates where persists, and garments never return to the pristine state they once had. The labor is ongoing, repetitive, and unending. Survival requires accepting imperfection while maintaining functionality. Patience, endurance, and adaptability are as crucial as thread and fabric. Clothing is not merely material, it is a daily practice, a reflection of labor, and a constant engagement with the realities of life. By nightfall, garments are patched, rotated, and set aside. Children and apprentices rest, learning through observation. The household prepares for another day of labor, aware that dirt, wear, and repair will repeat tomorrow. Life is a continuous cycle, wearing, soiling, washing, mending, and rotating. Each repetition teaches skill, endurance, and the subtle mastery of survival within the limits imposed by fabric, environment, and labor. And as you settle onto the straw mattress, the smell of damp fabric and hearth smoke mingling in the room, a thought emerges. In a world where clothing is constantly tested by labor, dirt, and wear, how do people retain a sense of self, dignity, or comfort? How does the relentless attention to fabric and repair shape perception, discipline, and daily existence? Perhaps the quiet mastery of clothes through rotation, mending, and adaptation is as vital to medieval survival as food, water, or shelter. Night has fallen over the small medieval dwelling, and the household settles into the familiar rhythm of rest, repair, and preparation for the next day. Yet even as sleep approaches, the labor of clothing care continues quietly in the back of your mind. Every garment has a story, worn, patched, and repaired over months or years. Dirt is constant, yet survival hinges on the careful management of fabric, wear, and cleanliness. Life is a continuous negotiation with the limits of material, labor, and time. The evening's work begins with a final inspection. Tunics are checked for loose threads, hose for holes, and aprons for stubborn stains. Minor repairs are completed immediately, small holes stitched, frayed hems reinforced, buttons or toggles replaced. The tactile familiarity with needle and thread becomes second nature, almost instinctive. Each stitch is purposeful, a small victory against decay and labor. Through this attention, garments endure longer, serving as shields against cold, injury, and exposure. Rotation remains central. Garments that have been worn are set aside to air, while previously aired clothing is readied for the morning. Even imperfect cleaning, brushing away dirt, shaking off debris, or exposing fabrics to smoke or sun is valuable. The cycle ensures that clothing continues to function, providing warmth, modesty, and utility despite the omnipresent accumulation of dirt. Survival depends on accepting imperfection while maximizing functionality. The household's labor does not stop with mere clothing repair. Shoes are inspected, soles oiled, and wooden clogs smoothed to prevent splintering. Underclothes, where washing is possible, are scrubbed and rinsed in cold water. Linen is often rotated more frequently than outer wool layers, which may see weeks of wear before full cleaning is feasible. Each decision what to wash, repair, or rotate is informed by experience, resources, and urgency. Life is a constant calculation between labor, necessity, and survival. Children participate in these routines, learning the practical wisdom of endurance. They assist in brushing garments, carrying threads or needles, and observing repairs. Over time, knowledge of fabric, dirt, and repair is absorbed naturally, becoming part of their understanding of domestic survival. This quiet education is as essential as formal instruction in farming, cooking, or trade skills. Clothing is not merely functional, it is a teacher of patience, observation, and discipline. The labor of maintaining clothing intersects with broader domestic routines. Cooking, tending animals, and managing the hearth all influence garments. Soot, grease, mud, and sweat accumulate relentlessly. You learn to prioritize cleaning and repair based on use, environmental exposure, and season. Outer layers may bear the brunt of daily work, while inner layers are preserved for comfort or social occasions. Every garment has a role, every stitch a purpose. Social expectations reinforce diligence. Even the humblest individual understands that clothing communicates occupation, status, and competence. A well-repaired tunic signals responsibility. A patched but neat appearance conveys skill and resourcefulness. While perfection is impossible, the effort invested in repair, rotation, and careful wear reflects both personal and communal values. Clothing becomes a language of survival, labor, and identity. Seasonality further shapes clothing routines. Winter demands heavier garments, multiple layers, and more frequent repairs as wool shrinks, frays, or is punctured by harsh weather. Summer allows lighter fabrics and fewer layers, but sweat, dust, and exposure accelerate wear. Every season requires adaptation, a careful balance between labor, comfort, and preservation of garments. You navigate this rhythm with attention and skill, gradually mastering the art of daily endurance. Even wealthier households face similar challenges, though their resources allow more garments and specialized labor for cleaning or repair. Still, fabric is vulnerable to decay, and labor-intensive care is never eliminated. Servants or dedicated household staff manage washing, mending, and rotation, yet the principles remain identical. Clothing must be maintained continuously, adapted to circumstance, and repaired before it fails. The skills of observation, patience, and diligence are universal. By night's end, clothing is organized, patched, aired, and prepared for another day. You lie down among the straw, soot, and faint odors of smoke and labor, surrounded by garments that have survived repeated cycles of wear and care. Their durability is a testament to human endurance, skill, and the quiet labor that defines everyday survival. Life is not marked by grandeur or luxury, but by continuous attention, adaptation, and the practical mastery of seemingly mundane tasks. And as sleep finally approaches, a thought lingers. In a world where dirt, wear, and imperfection are constants, survival relies not only on food, water, or shelter, but on the patient, repetitive, and skillful management of the ordinary. The quiet labor of clothing care, rotation, repair, and observation shapes daily life, teaches resilience, and sustains the household. Perhaps this is the lesson of medieval clothing, that the small, repetitive acts of attention, performed with care and persistence, are as vital to enduring life as any heroic endeavor or dramatic event.